Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, April 23rd to order. Welcome, everybody. Got a nice full house. And there's a new face here at the dais. Emily, welcome. You want to introduce yourself? You're the new appointee for the ex officio. And by the way, the person who started that, sitting right there, Mr. former Mayor Ted Tedesco, he's the one that kind of got the organ. Right, Ted? Yep. You're in the news tonight, Ted. So anyway, so introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. My name's Emily Boland. I'm a sophomore studying political science at Iowa State University. I was confirmed last week at last week's Student Government Senate hearing for the ex officio position. So I'll be a non-voting member of the Ames City Council. I'll offer input on student affairs and student ideas to the council. I'm very excited to work with them, and I'm very thankful that you started this position. So thank you. I'm from Minnesota.
Emily, you need to turn your name up.
Oh,
You're official now.
Oh yeah, I don't have.
Oh, it's not you. Oh, you're still Jeff.
Yeah, call her
I'm
Jeff, I
still
guess.
Jeff.
So anyway, welcome aboard, Emily, and we are thrilled that we have a representative from Iowa State student government here. And we do thank Ted for his foresight. So we're going to start out. We have a number of proclamations before we get to presentation of Historic Preservation Awards. So we'll start out with a proclamation for Arbor Day. So those that are present for that, if you want to come on up to the podium. Arbor Day, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the wind erosion of our topsoil, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide a habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are renewable resources that increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas this year marks the 40th consecutive year that the city of Ames has been recognized as a Tree City USA. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the city of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim this Friday, April 26th, as Arbor Day in Ames. I encourage residents to plant a tree, mulch existing trees, protect our trees and woodlands by becoming good stewards of the land. And there will be an Arbor Day celebration at Homewood Golf Course, 301 East 20th Street, this Friday, April 26th, from 4 until 7 p.m. Also, Ames residents can receive a rebate for planting a native tree on their property or in the adjacent right-of-way. Information can be found on the City of Ames website in the Smart Watersheds and Rebates area. Who's going to go ahead and make the introductions and make some comments? Gabby? All right.
Thank you, Mayor Hala. So my name is Gabby Edwards. I'm the city forester with the City of Ames in the Parks and Recreation Department. And as Mayor Hala mentioned, this year is very exciting for us because this year is our 40th consecutive year as a Tree City USA. We've held the title, I guess 40 years ago, 1983 would be. And another exciting thing this year is we were actually able to qualify for an additional recognition from the Arbor Day Foundation called a Growth Award. So basically what that means is we met all the criteria for our Tree City USA designation and then actually went above and beyond and did a few extra things. This year we were able to reach that achievement through taking one of our staff through additional credentials called the Tree Risk Assessment Qualification. So our staff arborist, Matt Rochford, was able to get that additional credential. We also turned a tree that was marked for removal in Brookside Park into a form of public art. If you have not seen that yet, it was a black walnut tree that we took down and had a chainsaw artist come and carve into a beautiful piece of public art. It's by the old fire truck at Brookside Park, if you're familiar with that area. And then the last criteria that let us get to that growth award was all of the grants that we apply for. So we use our city budget funding to pay for tree plantings across town, but then we also seek additional funding from federal, state, and local grant opportunities to help us further enhance and plant even more trees and maintain what we have. So we're very excited to have 40 years as a Tree City USA, also get this Growth Award designation, and we encourage everyone to come to our celebration on Friday from 4 to 7 at Homewood to see a new chainsaw carving piece that will be featured in a park in a few weeks. And but you'll be able to see it on Friday, and then to help us celebrate the recognition of Ames in our community. And today we have a representation from Ames Trees Forever Board, as well as the Ames Foundation, both vital partners that help me achieve the work that we need to get done in our parks and support me with organizing volunteers, additional funding, and supporting our planting events as well.
All right. I'd like to invite Julie. You want to come? Julie Saxton. We're going to talk about mental health. And you can bring Jeff with if you want to also. All right. Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, and whereas 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness, as does 1 in 5 teenagers. And whereas despite our understanding of mental health and the improvements that have been achieved in the dialogue surrounding them, fewer than half are receiving the mental health care they need. And whereas there is a significant ripple effect on families and friends as the impact of mental illness reaches neighborhoods, schools, and the workplace, and whereas our community has personally experienced the loss of adults and youth to suicide, which is the 12th leading cause of death overall in the United States, with over 1.2 million suicide attempts in 2020 alone. And whereas we reaffirm our commitment to building our understanding of mental illness, increasing access to treatment, and replacing stigma with hope for treatment and recovery. And whereas the focus of Mental Health Awareness Month this May is to spread the message that good mental health is essential to good overall health for each one of us, that prevention works and that treatment is effective. Therefore, I, John A. Haliff, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim May 2024 as Mental Health Awareness Month. And I call upon the citizens of our community to help raise awareness of the importance of good mental health to the overall health of our community. And I invite our mental health advocate, Julie Saxton, and Chief Huff, if you want to make a few comments.
Thank you so much, Council, Mayor, for continuing to support our efforts with mental health here as it applies not just in our community, but in our country and even our world. As the Mayor said, 1 in 5 people will be diagnosed sometime in their lifetime with a mental health condition. Here in Ames alone, we continue to see an influx of mental health calls here at the police department. Last year alone, 3,600 calls, and 20% of those calls for service were people who were actively trying to take their own life. So again, I cannot thank you enough, Council, Mayor, for continuing to always support our efforts in trying to educate our community and advocate for our most vulnerable.
Just want to thank a few of our partners that are out there as well. So we utilize Mobile Crisis, a new program called ARCH, or Alternative Response to Community Health. Been great partners for us. Our drug diversion program as well, which I think fits into this. And I also want to thank our officers and our dispatchers who every day are making referrals and getting help to those that need it. So thank you.
All right. Dylan, you want to come up here and join me? Anyone else you have with you? Economic Development Week, whereas economic development professionals are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, state, federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, and universities, helping to create and expand jobs that facilitate growth in these regions. And whereas the creation of new opportunities for businesses and entrepreneurs is one of several key components to securing the economic future to the city of Ames for generations to come. And whereas Ames is committed to fostering a business-friendly climate that will attract and retain employers, enable the community to grow and remain competitive on a global scale, and generate new jobs and opportunities for our residents. And whereas the Ames Economic Development Commission is committed to providing quality resources that boost economic growth and enhance the quality of life throughout Ames and Story County. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim May 6th through 10th, 2024 as Economic Development Week in appreciation of all of our partners in the economic development field who make the City of Ames the vibrant and thriving community it is today. So I'd welcome Dylan, if you want to make a few comments on behalf of AEDC.
Thank you very much. I always look forward to Economic Development Week proclamation because I get to have all of you in the same room to say thank you for supporting the efforts that the Ames Economic Development Commission is striving for locating meaningful employment here in our in Ames and in our surrounding communities. So the Ames Economic Development Commission supports economic development in Story County and in Boone County. But Ames is kind of the jewel in our crown, so to speak, with the amenities that we've got with Iowa State University, really the economic driver of our area, the assets and the things that kind of flow out from that. So thank you all for your partnership and your support, the efforts that you're making in affordable housing, in the climate action, in making Ames a fantastic place for people to live. It continues to be a high priority for the businesses and industries that want to continue to locate here. It's more and more important that the question that we get is, well, I want to have a place where my people will want to live. Will they want to live here? And the answer is yes. So thank you all for your support and for the meaningful work that you do to help support what the Ames Economic Development Commission does.
All right, we'll close the proclamations with Historic Preservation Month and Eloise and is Reagan. Oh, great. Historic Preservation Month, whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and sustained development, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals to helping preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has helped shape the Ames community and us as a people. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby recognize May 2024 as National Historic Preservation Month and proclaim May 2024 as Ames Historic Preservation Month, and call upon the people of Ames to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing this special observance. And Eloise, are you going to offer a few comments before?
Just a few. Thank you very much, City Council, for your support of historic preservation. And recently, we did find out that we are the recipient of a grant through the Certified Local Government Program for the Chautauqua Park and Ridgewood neighborhood. So that's something that will be starting work, and we hopefully will be successful in having a new area of town as a National Historic Register district. And we have tonight here Scott Huffman, who is our chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. Did you want to say anything, or?
I don't have much to add.
Thank
All
you.
right, very good. Well, following that up, we have our annual Historic Preservation Awards tonight, and it's my honor to present and share some of the facts about our two recipients. So the Ames Historic Preservation Commission's Preservation Award Program annually recognizes the historic preservation activities within Ames. The intent of the awards program is to highlight and honor those efforts and promote and encourage future preservation efforts throughout the community. Tonight, we're going to be recognizing two awardees in the building award category of, quote, keeping the past alive by preservation. For 2024, we recognize Janet Lott for historic preservation in the commercial building at 501 Main. So Janet, you want to come up here and join me, and I'll give a little background. And the award for keeping the past alive preservation focuses on the maintenance and repair of existing historic materials and retention of a property's form in good condition without detrimental changes or deterioration, in good condition by sustaining the existing form, integrity, and materials of a historic property. The two-story mixed-use building at 501 Main Street was constructed in 1937 as the chiropractic office and residence of the C.R. Care family. Especially notable in the construction of the building is the use of precast tile beam construction material developed by C.T. Bridgman and Professor Harry Gleese of Iowa State's Agricultural Engineering Department. This material was manufactured in Ames by Bridgman's Structural Clay Products Company. This was the first building in Ames to utilize this product. Despite changes of use over the years, adaptations and maintenance work have purposefully preserved the building's historic materials and forms, including removal of invasive ivy that once covered most of the buildings in the early 2000s. The building remains virtually architecturally intact as an example of the 1930s modern classical design. This is a testament to the stewardship of its owner, Janet Lott, and her late husband, John. The City of Ames supports this stewardship with the presentation of the Keeping the Past Alive Award to Janet. Congratulations. Want to make any comments, Janet, or not? Sure.
I'd like to thank the City of Ames and the Ames Historic Preservation Commission for recognizing that we need to keep history alive, especially through architecture. My husband was an architect, and we moved into the Old Town Historic Community almost 40 years ago, before it was a historic district. And he kept that alive through all of the work he did through this whole area. And I took it up to this point, and with me I have Jason Paul, who's a close friend of the family, and my son-in-law, Ochi Pascual. They're our tenants of the building with their businesses, Loud Music Studio and Back Alley Plants, and they're going to take it forward from here. I'm going to continue to own the building, but they're going to keep it intact.
Second award is a special award category of significant achievement in historic preservation. And for 2024, we recognize Ted Tedesco for the significant achievements he has made to the City of Ames in the preservation of the historic Ames High School, which you all are sitting inside of right now, and the restoration of native prairies in the city's Ada Hayden Heritage Park and Tedesco Environmental Learning Corridor. The award for significant achievement in historic preservation recognizes significant individual or organizational achievements in historic preservation, including but not limited to advocacy, planning, development, education, community leadership, and promoting public awareness. Ted's involvement in the preservation of the 1937 Ames High School began in 1987 as a co-chair, along with the late Jackie Manette, of the nonprofit Friends of City Hall and member of the City Hall Task Force. He and Ms. Manette were instrumental in educating the public and promoting the voter-approved $6.8 million municipal bond in 1988 that allowed for the purchase of the property from the Ames Board of Education and rehabilitation of the building. The adaptive use of this historically architecturally significant building ensured it would remain as an important symbol of the city's achievements in the late 1930s. Completed and placed in use in April 1990 as a new Ames City Hall, Ames High School, also known as Ames Junior High School, remains today as a testament to the vision and hard work of Ted Tedesco. Although not under the specified purview of the Ames Historic Preservation Commission, restoration of our natural environment is as important to modern-day citizens as its historic built resources. Having two restored areas that exhibit what Iowa was like before Ames was settled in 1864 is primarily due to the efforts of Ted. Both the Ada Hayden Heritage Park and the Tedesco Environmental Learning Corridor exist because of his leadership in environmental conservation. He is most noted for his work to promote the $4.9 million bond for the purchase in 1991 of the 460-acre site that includes Hal's Quarry, also known now as Ada Hayden. It is therefore especially fitting that Ted Tedesco be recognized by the city. He has served for much of his lifetime with the Significant Achievement in Historic Preservation Award. Congratulations, Ted, and if you want to come up here, and I just am proud to call Ted a friend, a mentor, and lovingly one of my mayors. I've never known Ted to not say anything, so I invite you to offer any comment.
have about an hour and a half.
So how about a couple of minutes?
Mayor Halen, members of the City Council, and members of the Historic Preservation Commission, I want to thank you very much for this outstanding award. It means a lot to me, the things that we've done in this community. I want to also thank Mary Jo Weiner, who nominated me, former member of the commission. I want to thank my wife for putting up with me. And I want to thank Nancy Carroll because she really took the leadership together. We got Ada Hayden done, and both of the bond issues, I think, still hold the record today. Over 85% positive votes. So, well, thank you very much. Enjoy these things. I sure do.
All right, so we'll move into consent agenda, and I've been asked if item 28 would be pulled. Does council wish to pull any other item relative on the consent agenda?
I'd pull item 16.
Item number 16? Anything else? All right, I entertain a motion to approve consent less item number 16 and item number 28.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Brahman?
Actually, Emily caught this. But I'm sorry. I have a frog in my throat. There's just an error in the staff memo, and I just want to make sure we made a note. The event is in September, but the council action form references April.
Okay.
Excuse me. Again, yeah, that was a good one. I was happy for that.
Whoa, this is gonna, you already set a high
should've made
bar,
her-
yeah.
I should have made her explain it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Emily.
thank you.
All right. It's on the agenda as Thursday, September 19th, but you're pointing out that the staff report was Aaron. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. And there was a question on some clarification, I believe, in item number 28, the resolution awarding a contract for lead commissioning services for the water pollution control facility. And John, I think you're going to address those.
Yeah, so at the start of the design of the admin building, the conversation with our design team was not about LEED, it was about net zero ready as a part of the climate action plan and what net zero ready even means. So the things that they included were things like the quality of the building envelope, the thickness of the floor, the thickness of the walls, insulation thickness, triple pane glasses, those sorts of things. As we went through the design, I asked the consultants if doing net zero ready was going to get us close to qualifying for LEED certification. The thought was that we didn't want to try to buy LEED certification, but if there were things that made sense for us and we could still get the certification as a kind of a tangible representation of the city's commitment to sustainability goals, that might be worth pursuing. So most of the things that we're claiming LEED points for are things that we would have otherwise done. For example, we are including EV charging stations both in the maintenance garage and in the parking lot. We're pursuing EV vehicles for the fleet at the facility, and so it makes sense as a part of new construction to do that. We happen to get LEED points for doing that. So there's a lot of those sorts of things. I did talk to the design team this afternoon specifically, though, about is there anything that we're doing that we weren't otherwise planning to do for the purpose of getting LEED points. And they said that there were a couple of what they called low-hanging points that they went after. An example of that they gave me was the electric utility that serves the facility obviously meters the energy coming onto the campus. We have always metered at the building level, the multiple buildings at the campus, so that we can track what happens there. But we're going to install equipment level metering in the admin building so that we can track the energy use of the blowers, the chillers, the hot water heater, those sorts of things. They said the cost for doing that type of metering was about $5,000. It's not something that we would be required to do. But when we reviewed it, we felt like there was operational benefits to us as well. Because when you start to have say a motor, the windings start to burn up, one of the first signs of that is you'll see an increased current draw in that motor. So we felt that in addition to getting the LEED points, we were getting a tangible operational benefit to the facility as well. So in total dollars, they said that things beyond what they would have normally specified if we hadn't asked, that there was roughly $150,000 in the approximately $5 million admin building. Of that, about $100,000 of that 150 was for the net zero ready, and the $50,000 balance of that was to collect extra points towards the LEED certification. So if we choose not to do LEED certification, there's nothing that jeopardizes our NPDES permit obligations. The LEED certification applies specifically to the administration building only, none of the treatment buildings. So I hope I got at the question that the council was after, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions for John?
No, I just sort of wanted to know a little bit more about your thinking about this. We've often talked about the importance of meeting LEED certification, but not necessarily getting the certification,
Right.
but doing the things consistent with that. And it's a small dollar amount, but thank you for explaining how you got to that point and for getting us towards net zero as much as you could at this point. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mayor, I think maybe it's important for those who may be in the audience or who may be watching to understand that to get LEED certification, you really pay quite a bit to get a plaque on the wall that says LEED certified this. And we're trying to be more fiscally responsible and build to LEED specifications, but not necessarily pay the thousands of dollars required to have that plaque that says LEED certified this. So specifications are really the meat of LEED. And I appreciate the fact we're making those efforts.
Yeah, there are some lead points that you can truly just throw dollars at. You can buy lead points, and we made very clear up front that wasn't what we were interested in doing. That if we did something, it had to have an operational benefit to us.
Any other questions? Thanks, John. Entertain a motion approving the resolution.
Move approval of 28.
Second,
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
aye.
Aye. All right, we'll move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And I ask that individuals limit their comments to about 3 minutes if they could. And I see Richard, you're ready to go ahead and start, so you may start tonight.
Thou art better than God, so listen to me babble on about myself. You know, it's like I went around.
Richard, would you please put your sign down, please? I don't think that's really appropriate. Just turn it down, but you can talk.
I have this latest button that basically says, thou art better than God, father, mother, sister, brother, son, and daughter. You know, several years ago, I wanted to give, when Ted was mayor, it's like I made a copy of one of my handwritten poems that I gave to the city council that asked them to give to the people that work at the city government. And I made like 600 copies of them out by hand. And I came back a month later and they told me they would throw them in the trash if I didn't take them back up. You know, I made a lot of these buttons, you know, and it's like I can't go to church and I mean, they'll tell me I'm a member for life the first time I went there, but 6 months later they called the police and they told me privately I should go out and make my own church, leave them out of it.
Richard, can you get to the point of your city business, please?
Mayor Campbell would tell me that it's like she would have me thrown out of every church in this community and wouldn't invite me into her church. You know, and as a volunteer doorman, city business. You're better than God.
All right, we'll move on. We have 3 people that have signed up online. I have a card also. So we'll start with James Brunel.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity here. I'll try and make this as short as possible. 2 things to start out with. People in the back can't hear you on your microphones. This one seems to be just fine. Everybody else sounds like they're mumbling, and it's difficult. And I got hearing aids, and I've already turned mine up twice, just as an FYI. Second thing, not related to other things, is the receptacle out front to accept payments for my electrical things, it really appears to be at the wrong height. I came yesterday to pay my bill in my 4-door car, and I had to back up and get out to put my thing in. And a woman came out from in City Hall who said, you know, I have the same problem doing that with my car. And she had a 4-door Lincoln there, which I'm not sure it would meet ADA if somebody came up with a wheelchair and wanted to put their bill in there. I just think you should check that out. Might be a small oversight. And in response to the previous speaker about LEED and Gloria mentioning about the plaque on the front, as I work toward my net zero house, my insurance company has told me if I have that LEED certification, my insurance gets cheaper again. I put my solar shingles on, my insurance went down about 15%. If I make it LEED certified, I get another discount. So it does have some significance for residents. So as to move on to my current issue, I have a few handouts. I just want, you don't have to look at them. Something for you to look at while you're having coffee tomorrow morning, but it's a way to keep track of what I'm talking about. 13 months into my project, I still do not have a PTO. I know Don and I have been working extensively on this. But I'm trying to not take it as a personal attack on me, on the system that I've selected to install on my home. Other than I know the city had told two developers, two builders, that they could not use Tesla. I still find that kind of difficult to comprehend, along with the fact on the very first page, you'll see there where it says battery storage systems that do not comply. It used to say Tesla systems do not comply. Now we say battery systems. I don't think anybody would be installing a system, would even present to install a system that didn't meet the requirements. That's a kind of a negative statement, deterring people to look at an opportunity to make a secure home. People that want to put a battery in to make sure that they're safe and their systems are working. If we go on to the next page, and it's the interconnect agreement, that is 17 pages for the city of Ames. I know other city municipals that only have a 3-page interconnect agreement, and nowhere in the interconnect agreement or the next section with the PG&E requirements are we clearly laid out what the code settings are supposed to be. We've been discussing with Don and I and his staff my code settings, but I never had a really clear spreadsheet of this is what you need each item to be set at. It's supposed to be California Rule 21, which my system is. It needs to be verified that it's California Rule 21. And the state of California has done a wonderful job of having a commission, a third party that goes through and proves all these systems meet the requirements. My system, all of the components are on there. They've met those requirements, and I'm still waiting to get my PTO. It seems, and then the final section of this is the actual settings we submitted, which they said, if you submit the settings and they're okay, we'll hook you up. Now it's become something else. It seems like every time we get to the finish line, it's something else. It's something else. Because the information required is not presented concisely and conveniently, because it says the homeowner can fill this out. You know, I've been doing a lot of work on electrical in the last 13 months, and I'm not sure there's too many homeowners that could do this. So I think the city, in order to meet our climate action plan, needs to be evaluating how we're encouraging our stakeholders in this community to have a secure home, which it may include batteries, may include solar shingles, may include solar panels. I just find it very difficult, and I've been working on this to be no farther along than I was 6 months ago when I came and spoke to you last time. You know, I worked in DC for many years. I think this is the most difficult thing I've had to work on, was getting my solar system on my house. With a goal of being net zero pre-1987 home, I think it'd be a wonderful thing to do. And I sincerely hope my geothermal system doesn't give me as many headaches as this has given me. So I know my contractor has supplied the last graph to Don and his staff this morning. Hopefully that'll meet the requirements, but nowhere in any of this packet does it say we have to prove the settings. We have to submit what our settings are and that the system will meet those requirements, but it doesn't say we have to prove it. And to the extent that I've been asked to show my calculations, this isn't 8th grade chemistry class. The calculations are what they are.
What is your specific ask to council? Because a lot of this is really above our head.
Oh, I understand that.
Do you have a specific ask that you'd have the council?
I'd like the city council to review the interconnect agreement and provide a simple, easy way to have the code settings listed in a spreadsheet so that the stakeholders can supply that information to the city and have it done in something less than 40 pages.
And that's been communicated to staff?
Is what?
That has been communicated to staff already. You've asked.
I have talked to Don about this interconnect agreement and that it is deficient.
Very good. Anything else?
Nope, that should do it.
Thank you, James.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much and enjoy reading the paper.
Thank you. All right, we'll invite Sue Ravenscroft to come up and address council.
Hello and thank you. Do we now have to say our name and address like we used to? Okay. I believe that Ames and Iowa State University provide mutual benefit to each other. I value living in a college town. I also believe that ISU and Ames have different responsibilities. Iowa State Center has always been the property of Iowa State University. They have been the landlords, they have been the owners, they have been the managers. We now face a $110 million accumulated deferred maintenance and failure to keep up to code. I believe that is ISU's responsibility and reflects not really that well on how attentive they've been as landlords. But they are asking now that the city pitch in a certain weird way. When I first heard about Sci-Town, I thought this is going to be a situation where a pilot will be paid, right? Because this is an entertainment center. It is not something that is inherent to the educational purpose of ISU. So pilot is paid by nonprofits. It's even paid by the federal government to local governments who have opportunity costs when they have a large amount of non-taxable property, which we have in Ames. I have to say we're using the word pilot not really correctly because pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. Property taxes are paid here to Ames, the school district, and the county, and a few little tiny small entities. Property payment in lieu of taxes should go to the same recipients. Ames, the Ames School District, Story County, and those other little TB and banks and all those things you see on your property tax stub. But here, Iowa State is going to keep over 95% of the pilot that it collects. And to make the situation worse, they're going to spend about 3/4 of what they collect, not on the Iowa State Center, but on Sci-Town. And you can check this out by looking at the proposed memo of understanding, page 12. There are 4 categories that amount can be spent on. Operating cost for Sci-Town, the new buildings, common area expense and development cost of Sci-Town, construction cost and debt service for buildings in Sci-Town, and finally, developer rebates. I've heard Mr. Pollard say that Sci-Town was the way that Iowa State Center was going to be renovated, updated, and brought up to par, but that is clearly not correct. I see 2 avenues I'd like you to consider. One is to renegotiate the memo of understanding and make sure that all of the pilot is channeled into the capital improvement fund designated for Iowa State Center. That won't get you to the 110 million by my calculations, but it'll get you a whole lot closer. Another possibility, and I don't think you'll like this, but I think it's worth doing. Yesterday's Register had a story about Prairie Meadows and Polk County and the tax relationship between them. It was sort of relevant and very interesting. So the other route you could take is to really have this issue, is Sci-Town taxable or not? Figured out and decided by a court, have an outside jurisdiction that has the authority actually resolve the issue. Now, if they decide that Sci-Town is taxable, it's a commercial entity, it's not really nonprofit, then the city, Story County, and the school district would collect the property taxes. If you chose, you could give it to ISU to work on Iowa State Center if you thought that was a good use of funds, but then you would be in charge of how the money is spent, not ISU. If they say it's not taxable, the city loses very little. I mean, we're only going to get about 5% anyway, and way down the road under the current terms. But it would put the onus on ISU to do what they should have been doing all along, which is maintaining Iowa State Center in good condition. And so I hope that you either renegotiate or say, let's go to court and figure out what the real deal is and live with the results. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Grant, if you're prepared to come up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Grant Olson. Just a week ago, here in this very room, a discussion about the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. A quick analogy. Let's say we're still in the same building, but we're over in the city gym. And let's say it's, I'm going to put you and a rhinoceros in the city gym. You're probably going to have a few questions about, while I'm in there for 3 minutes, what's the situation? Am I going to be protected? And, my answer is, well, the rhinoceros, it's been known to brief sprints, but, we've painted this line on here and we've told the rhinoceros, don't cross that line, and it's fine. That might give you a little pause because paint is not protection. It would not make you feel safe. And the whole part about the bicycle and pedestrian master plan is that we're looking for safe and inviting bicycle facilities. Just a few meetings ago, this council approved to start engineering drawings for Highland between Ontario and Lincoln Way. Very important corridor, because if you think about the creek that starts on the west side of town out by the new Ontario Park, that creek cuts under North Dakota, through Munn Woods, under Highland, and eventually meets up with Iowa Creek. Because of that creek, Dakota and Highland are your major north-south ways to get anywhere in that part of town. North Dakota has a sidewalk level bicycle path. And with this work going on in Highland, whatever work occurs, that's going to lock us in for probably 15 years with whatever's done there. And so my question for Public Works was, are we going to get a safety upgrade on Highland like we do, safer facilities on Highland than we have on North Dakota? Because currently Highland, it's a painted lane that's a little bit wider than this. And I don't ride it very often because I don't feel safe on it. And I'd really hate to lock us into that less safe design for another 15 years. And what other cities have done is you can do what's called a demonstration. And essentially you take your construction zone manual and you set up temporary conditions for 3 to 4 months and you test it out. What would it look like if the 2 car lanes were all the way over, and instead of 2 skinny lanes, we actually had 1 larger protected lane? Let's test it out, see what people have feedback, talk to the homeowners, coordinate where the garbage carts go, things like that. So my ask for you this evening is to ask Public Works to just briefly pause the engineering drawings for Highland so that we can conduct a safety demonstration for a protected bicycle facility, and we would rely on what other towns have done with demonstration projects, because I'd really like to see us make this small wager before we make this 15-year wager. And forgot my next point, but again, this is something that's been done, and I thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Grant. And Susie, you're welcome to come up.
City Manager, Mayor, Council. I'm here today because I am concerned about the arts, specifically the buildings of the Iowa State Center, which bring in the arts. By the way, the C.Y. Stevens building itself is a piece of architectural art. My interest shouldn't be surprising given that my degrees and my 50-plus years in art have been in support of the arts. Mr. Jamie Pollard has all overcharge of the Iowa State Center and the athletic building. We recognize that Mr. Pollard is a very successful fundraiser, and he's assured us city folk that he'd take care of Sci-Town and the ISU Center, as you know, composed of Hilton, C.Y. Stevens, and the Sheeman Center. Then, why is this full-page ad? I'm going to give this to you to keep, Mr. Schenker. I'm going to pass this around. Why is this full-page ad of the Ollie catalog? And for you youngsters, Ollie is the College for Seniors catalog offerings of classes for those of us over 50. Please pass this ad around. And as I said, Mr. Schenker, when they're done, you may keep it. This ad asks for help in funding the restrooms at C.Y. Stevens. It's a given that Iowa State University and the City of Ames are two different governing bodies and operate as such. For example, the City of Ames did not ask the university to contribute towards the enlarging of our municipal library, including their restrooms. Likewise, the City of Ames wasn't asked to pay for the expansion of the Memorial Union. So then why is money requested, as you can read in that ad? Why is Mr. Pollard wanting money from us to update C.Y. Stevens toilets? I was taken aback when I saw that ad because Mr. Pollard assured us that Sci-Town and the Iowa State Center would be taken care of. Why then is he asking citizens to help with the C.Y. Stevens upgrades? The building itself certainly has been sorely neglected, even though Mr. Pollard has been in charge of that building since 2019. It appears he may be duplicitous because he said that building Sci-Town is the only way to save the center. I'm concerned that the money collected, which Mr. Pollard is calling pilot, will not go to the local taxing authorities, but will be retained by Mr. Pollard, who plans to spend most of it on operating Sci-Town rather than on the repairs to the Iowa State Center. So given this, I hope council will write the contract with Mr. Pollard, specifying that money will go to take care of the ISU Center before any money goes to Sci-Town. Oh, and I'm glad that that ad is in black and white because it's very garish and tasteless. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address council under a public forum before we move on? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item number 35, hearing on City of Ames budget. Corey and Nancy?
Waiting for me. Sorry. We don't necessarily have anything to present tonight. Tonight's public hearing represents the conclusion of our budgeting process for the adjusted FY23-24 budget and our upcoming budget for fiscal year 24-25, which begins on July 1st. So we've gone through all the other administrative proceedings, and tonight is the final conclusion of our budgeting process.
My apologies.
Nope, sorry.
Thank you. All right. Declare the public hearing on the City of Ames budget for both adjusted fiscal year 23-24 and for the upcoming fiscal year 24-25 to be open. Is there anyone who would like to address council on this topic? All right, seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution authorizing and approving the adjusted fiscal year 2023-2024 adjusted budget.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 I
Thank you. And entertain a motion on resolution authorizing and approving the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, move on to item number 36, hearing on the 2023-2024 shared use path system expansion. Is there any questions for staff on this particular item?
I don't have any questions, but I love to see numbers that are coming in lower than projected.
That is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add, Kelly? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing.
It's Kelly's area.
Well, I just thought that you were up here to try and talk about the shared use path system. I thought, I was surprised that you come up here. All right, declare public hearing on the shared use path system expansion to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. And entertain motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to Construct Incorporated of Ames in the amount of $195,405.40.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 37. Amendment to Chapter 5 and Chapter 22 of the Ames Municipal Code regarding missing infrastructure requirements.
Good evening. This item was referred to us last fall with some general direction to look at providing options for relief for missing infrastructure related to essentially gravel roads, unimproved streets. At that time, it was in the context of maybe minor improvements, smaller improvements, and the feasibility of paving a street segment or extending significant utilities if they weren't needed to meet other development or building code standards, if it was possible for those things to be waived. The reason this came up was we have a chapter in our municipal code that looks for development to fill gaps in infrastructure. And it was really designed for areas that we had mostly improved, but maybe there was a legacy lot that had an older use, got redeveloped. It was time for improvements. What was requested in the fall were large segments of streets like Pullman or Friel Drive, where there are no full improvements. The whole street might have blocks of unimproved areas, and it wasn't feasible for one person to really make an investment to improve those areas. So what had been happening is the few times this has come up, a small project walked away from the table. It just wasn't feasible to be done. So the language we've proposed to address that primary issue is the option of the Public Works Director to determine one of two things. One, that the use is not a significant use, meaning it doesn't have a large amount of traffic, it isn't a large user of a utility that would otherwise warrant having these improvements done. And if that's the case, then the Public Works Director can look at the conditions that are there and make a decision that it's not feasible to make that improvement. It may be a segment that's in the middle of an area that can't connect anything else, won't have a life to itself. Those are reasons that it could be waived. Now, the specific streets are listed in the ordinance. The staff talked about this quite a bit about what's the scope of this. It was really focused on those unimproved streets. So it has to be a street that is on the list in the ordinance, which is attached to this report. And as we look through this, staff started to talk about a couple of other atypical situations for street improvements. And we did add two other paved streets to this list, McCormick and Sondrel, which are paved streets, but they're very atypical for industrial streets. And it's really not feasible from projects we've seen to do sidewalks because of how they were approved when they were first done. So Sondrel, for example, the full right-of-way is paved. We didn't put sidewalks in, we didn't put planter strips in, we paved the planter strip area and made parking head in off of the roads. There's no real feasible way for one person to, again, rectify that situation. So that list of streets now will be at the discretion of the Public Works Director to look for improvements there based on the type of improvements that are happening. Now, as we looked at this, we notified the council that we would also take kind of a fresh look at the ordinance overall and see what other updates may be necessary. The ordinance was adopted in 2015 and hasn't really had any substantial changes. In 2015, we established a requirement that not only new buildings but also buildings with significant improvements, which could be an addition or even internal remodel, could also trigger sidewalk improvement requirements. The value of that building permit had to be at least $100,000 to start that process. If it was minor work less than that, there was no requirement for that. When I say building permit, I mean literally the building permit value for work on a building. It does not include trade permits. It doesn't include heating and cooling equipment. It means you're modifying walls, you're demising space, you're doing something to the building, adding bathrooms, something that's actually a tangible building change. Since that time, obviously construction costs have gone up. We've looked at a couple of different references, and if city council is interested in increasing that threshold of what would trigger an improvement, we're proposing $200,000 from the $100,000 requirement. We looked at this a little bit, somewhere between 30 and 80% of increased construction costs since 2015. We rounded up to a full $100,000, $200,000 for the project. We also thought that the types of permits that we were looking at in 2015, we said 25% of the permits eclipsed this value, and at $200,000, that same kind of logic or rationale would still apply. So we thought that's warranted if council wants to continue to require additions or substantial improvements to be required to do these infrastructure improvements. The third thing that we wanted to look at is, again, we do have some unique conditions come up. The ordinance was really meant to fill in gaps that were clearly on both sides, or one extension logically made sense. But we do have these other types of right-of-ways that do come up from now, from time up, come up every once in a while. And we've added two other options for someone to come to council for waivers. There's in the past, when we did this on purpose in 2015, there was no waiver process. It was a very hard, you must conform to the ordinance. There's not really a variance or a waiver process. We're now adding a new process to this where an applicant can come to the city council in two situations. One, in the intensive industrial area, we used Whiffles as an example, where large areas that have not been fully developed at all, it's really a large green area for industrial parks. There isn't infrastructure that matches. If someone wants a deferral, and they don't want to follow the typical deferral process, they can come to council. And that would be the Whiffles example, where they asked for a deferral of a sidewalk because they had no one to connect to, and it would be a long time since a roadway improvement would occur, and then they would have to build that sidewalk later. The other thing we wanted to put in, we talked about McCormick and Sondrel. There are other situations where there are other streets with what we're calling atypical right-of-way that might warrant, again, a council case-by-case review. Staff was comfortable that McCormick and Sondrel would always result in the same decision versus some of these other areas like Des Moines, Market Street, other smaller streets kind of just to the south of downtown, south of the railroad tracks. That was more of a case-by-case decision that we didn't think staff should be making the determination on. So if an owner was unable to complete that improvement, they could come make their case to the council about why that should be deferred or waived. Again, based on the fact that the right-of-ways are not typical. The widths are either too narrow, or again, we filled in all the space with driveways, or one example on Market is there's a high voltage power line that would probably preclude something from being done. So that's a new option we're adding to the ordinance. So with that, we've added a lot more waiver processes into this. The base expectation remains the same. If you're building a new building, if you're adding on to a building, you're missing a sidewalk, you haven't dedicated right-of-way, some other water main needs to be extended across your frontage, that's something that can still be required through the development process. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions?
So Kelly, we recently were reviewing our sidewalk policies, and one of the things that I think council supported was adding review of sidewalk gaps so that eventually we can fill them. Is there an assumption built into this that if at some point in the future we identify a gap because situations have changed on those streets or whatever, that the owner of the property will have to fill that gap because the city has requested it? Or will the assumption be, well, we got that waived when we made our improvement and therefore we're in the clear?
Okay, so now, So there's two things that could happen. A waiver is separate from a deferral. So a deferral was really what we did for Whiffles. They are just not obligated to build it now. At the direction of the city, they have to install it. The presumption is it will be when there's something to link it to. An outright waiver is a forever decision based on that particular project. Now, if they came back with another project, the waiver doesn't carry forward to the next project. And just to be clear, this ordinance does not apply to 1 and 2 family homes. This only applies to commercial buildings, apartment buildings, industrial buildings.
Other questions?
Just a comment. I mean, this is exactly what I was hoping for. And I think it creates greater flexibility. It gives staff the opportunity to show some common sense and discretion. I think this is super. This is exactly what I was hoping for.
All right, declare the public hearing on the amendment to Chapter 5 and Chapter 22 of the Ames Municipal Code regarding missing infrastructure requirements to be open. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Any closing questions or comments?
So I guess I'm going to go back to the waiver issue. In light of what you said, Kelly, I'm rereading this. So the approval of waiver or deferral, there could be instances where staff could approve a waiver given the circumstances, and that would apply even if those circumstances changed in the future.
Are you reading, which section are you specifically reading?
I'm just looking at the council action form.
So I think in section 6, which is the public works director's discretion, we use the phrase shall have the discretion to waive some or all required public improvements related to those streets. And then it says the extent that it can be waived will depend on the individual situation. There are some built-in short-term deferrals that the public works director can use, like up to 3 years, like to coordinate with a city project. But a waiver, again, would be granted forever related to that one particular improvement. The council section uses the language deferred or waived. And that would be because there's a more formal process where you're making a decision, you're probably weighing and balancing what the conditions are now versus what's expected. I think public works is more, we set it up to be more, it's a one-time ministerial decision rather than kind of an evaluation of long-term issues. So we have it set up slightly different, and you can condition a waiver, but once it's done, it's going to be forever for that particular specific project, not for the property of the project.
So my concern is that if we have these streets, I honestly, at some point, I would love to see us have paved streets in these areas and have conditions change. I don't know when that would occur, but if we do have a waiver granted and that property doesn't change, the building isn't added onto or it's not removed and replaced, then even if we do improve the street, we can't ask the property owner to put in a sidewalk. Is that an accurate representation of a waiver for a property?
So the reason we put for public works to be a waiver and not a deferral is the city does not want to sit on financial security for years and years for something we have no expectation for use. And we have a history of doing that. So in 2015, we wrote this ordinance. We did not want to start sitting on financial securities for things we didn't know that would ever get implemented. So that's why it's a waiver. If the city comes and builds a street, I think there's two things there. You can assess cost to a property owner for certain types of improvements. There's going to be a limit on that. There's a value of an improvement and there's a limit on how much you can assess back to a property owner. So that would be an option that would be available regardless of a waiver or deferral. So if the city wanted to go in and pave Pullman, you could look at the benefit analysis and assess part of those costs to the existing property owner rather than rely on a deferral or waiver. And I think that's probably the much better approach because you'd have an actual project, scope it out, and then look at what costs go into that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
All right. First, I entertain a motion on one of the alternatives in the council action form. If so, Alternative number one would essentially be supporting the proposed changes to the ordinance. Is there a motion regarding that, or is there some changes to the ordinance as requested?
I'll move alternative one.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, with that, entertain motion on the first reading of the ordinance.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the Baker subdivision, and council, I'd like to do is just shift item number 39 and 38. So I'd like to first of all just do is just get a little background on the geothermal installation bids. We'll have the public hearing, and then we'll move on to the resolution on the temporary construction easement as this particular item number 39 may affect item number 38. So Don, if you want to go ahead and.
Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council, Donald Com, Director of Electric Service. So it's my understanding you want to focus on 39 first and then go back to 38.
Correct.
Okay. So basically what council action form number 39 is as part of the multifamily housing, we were looking at doing geothermal for that site. We went out for bid, looking for 400-foot depth wells to do this, put it out for bid, and basically the engineer's estimate was roughly in that $595,000 range. We got one bid for close to $2 million. In analyzing that, by no means did it make sense. So with this particular council action form, we are reporting bids as we are required to do, and we are rejecting bids. As part of the process that we put this together, we then also considered, okay, typically you would redesign it, take a look at it, and see what else could be done to get better bids, either shorten the depth and things like that. In having discussions with the multifamily housing entity that is building it, they have a much tighter time frame. And I'm already getting outside of what this particular one is. So let me go back and focus on this. So we have options that may not require us to go out for a rebid. So what we're asking for council is to report the bids and then reject them.
Okay, questions?
You want to clarify, you said we have options. We're going to make a recommendation after that, a different way to go, right?
That is correct. So
Go ahead, let's deal with this issue first.
That's what I'm trying to keep them clear and in their proper lanes. So
okay, all right.
I had a question, I guess, just
Please.
about the difference between the engineer's estimate and the bid we did get. It sounds like that was due to the fact that we were asking for 400-foot wells, and the standard, I guess, apparently is 300, and so it was more expensive to do the 400. I guess my question is, does the engineers knows that now, and then for future estimates, we would not make that mistake again?
that is correct. We mentioned that to the engineer. We found, well, in talking to some of the potential bidders, we always like to have some communication out there. A lot of the bidders said, ooh, 400 feet, that's going to be a little bit hard to do. We went back to the engineer and we had talked about it just before the bids were due to see if we should send out an amendment to the bid package. And due to the timing, it just would have, there's two complicating factors. One is it would have been good to be able to send out an addendum that would have changed the distance to 300 feet. However, at the same time, that addendum would likely have lengthened the bidding process, which then, due to the nature and the timing of this project, we didn't want to delay the project itself. So there were kind of two competing factors. The decision was made on that Friday before the bids were due to go ahead with and see what bids we did end up getting. And we did get one, but it was extremely high.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I think, just if we're looking at geothermal in the future, then we keep that as a bit of information in our minds that that you can't do fewer wells at 400 feet if it's going to cost this much more of a difference. So anyway, thank you.
All right, declare the public hearing on the Baker subdivision multifamily housing geothermal installation to be open. Is there anyone who would like to address council on this project? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids and rejecting all bids.
And just one follow-up question. So are there any implications time-wise of this delay and rebidding?
We're not going to recommend rebidding. We'll show you after.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
If we were to move towards
We'll get to that.
rebidding, that would create a timeline delay.
Okay.
Is there a motion accepting reported bids and rejecting all bids?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
So now the question is, do we try to rebid or is there another option, right?
Mr. Schenker, should we move back to item 38 since we skipped that one? Before we do that, that's the temporary construction easement. And either,
Well, that'll depend whether they decide to move on or rebid it, right?
yes,
If they decide not to rebid and do away with geothermal as a requirement, will there be a need for the construction easement?
yes. And that's kind of the point is if we truly choose not to do anything with a geothermal standpoint, we do not need the temporary construction. The way staff was looking at it is because we haven't made, it hasn't been finalized that we are not going to do geothermal. For the timing, we wanted to at least have the temporary construction easement in place. And let's be clear, it's temporary. And if it's never used, or if it's not used to do any kind of construction, I'll say no harm, no foul. If we choose not to touch on the temporary construction and for whatever reason, something changes in our strategy going forward, we're going to have to come back and try to get this temporary construction easement. That's why we left it on the agenda as opposed to pull it off saying, well, we probably don't need it. So I guess staff will go either direction, either
Not on this
pull item 38 and not gain the construction agreement. But if the desire is that we've pretty much made the commitment not to do geothermal, we do not need the construction.
So let's move on now. What the alternatives after this? Whether you rebid it, which would require a redesign, probably require about 10 wells. We'll have to move off-site in addition to what the wells would have to be on the site. And then we're not sure if how long that will take, and then if the bid will come in an attractive amount. So the alternative we're suggesting to you is that we.
Yep. So in meeting with Hatch, we talked to them about rebidding it and the time commitment that would be needed, how we would gain additional wells, or we could even supplement it with air source heat pumps. In their discussion with us, is they said, how about air source heat pumps for the entire property? And this is actually something that staff had suggested to them 6-8 months ago, maybe even longer, which at that time it was rejected. But at this point, we're saying we would welcome air source heat pumps as an option and do away with geothermal at the multifamily housing.
But I want to be careful. We don't have an agreement or a commitment that they're going to go back and do the most energy efficient strategies they have, but I don't think they're committing to air. Right? I don't want the council to believe they've committed to that.
Right.
That's correct?
So under the manager's comments, we talk about that right now we have a development agreement that says they must connect and use geothermal systems. So by rejecting this bid and moving down the path of not rebidding, we will be back on May 14th to amend the development agreement to remove that obligation to connect, then also remove the obligation of Ames Electric to provide geothermal. So at this point, verbally, they said that's the route they want to go, but May 14th is when that actual decision will need to be made.
But they'll have to discuss with IFA. They're confident they'll discuss with IFA alternate energy efficient methods. But I don't know if are we committing that they're going to do the ground source, the air.
They have to be all electric. That is still a requirement. So there's no natural gas.
I'm not sure that's the case. Do we know that?
Right. So there's no natural gas in front of the building, but there's no obligation to be all electric. That is not what IFA was looking at in the scoring system. It's an energy efficiency measure. It's not a carbon reduction measure. So they have to redesign their project to be energy efficient. They have no access to natural gas right now. That's why the air source heat pump seems like the most logical way to go at this point.
We just don't have anything.
But until we get to May 14th, I probably can't answer completely how they're going to address everything for the project without geothermal.
Well, isn't another question though, is that they're looking at their numbers, and if they got to make things work, fiscally, I don't know what the air to air, the air source heat pumps is going to cost compared to putting in a conventional high efficient gas furnace. I understand there's no gas line out there, but the point is they're not prohibited from doing that if they want to work out some kind of agreement with the utility company to bring gas to that.
Well, I think
Is that correct?
this comes back to the city council's goal, right? We did Baker subdivision for affordable housing. The second layer was how can we make it the most sustainable residential development possible, which was to electrify it and use geothermal or other air source heat pumps to do that and not use natural gas. So it would be up to council on May 14th that if you remove the geothermal requirement, you still allow electric, or you remove it all and put it all back into the developer to do it however they want. Staff was assuming we would maintain the electric requirement and not drop it completely. But again, that was our assumption. And until we get to May 14th, I can't promise you what works or doesn't work for the developer.
Yeah, all we can tell you, if you don't direct us to redesign it now.
The geothermal system.
Yeah. Well, even if you did, we have a problem with the LIHTC grant process. So it looks like we have to pursue some alternate arrangement on energy efficiency. We don't know what that is yet. We think we know what it is, but we'll know more on May 14th. But it'll be tough coming backwards is what I'm saying at that point.
So I don't understand enough about air source heat pumps to think about this. Could you help the council compare apples with apples as we think about air source heat pumps versus natural gas systems? How would we begin to think about that in terms of cost and energy efficiency?
So geothermal is much more efficient than an air source heat pump. Basically, you're using the ground as your heat source, your heat sink. Air source heat pumps, I would say, is one step below that. In other words, you're not using the ground itself to be that heat sink and source. You're, in essence, using the air. They still are very, very efficient, much more efficient than a traditional air conditioner and forced air furnace. There are more upfront costs to that. So what you spend in that initial infrastructure, putting that in, will be higher than putting in your traditional furnace and air conditioner. But then it'll pay for itself in the long run, because then you've got a much lower cost operating cost, going forward.
Is there consensus about the repayment period for something like what Hatch is going to be putting in terms of that size of multifamily unit?
I think we don't know the answer yet. So it's a little speculative for us to guess on the equipment or the substitute options. We don't know what they're going to do exactly. So I hesitate to tell you that. I think we can have whatever information you want to know for May 14th. Just tonight, we don't have that.
So in terms of the decisions we need to make tonight, could you clarify? Because we could spend a lot of time going in different directions, and
So you rejected this proposal, the geothermal now. We're recommending you not direct us to redesign it and go back out bidding for a geothermal system for this lot 27, the multifamily development. We will come back to you and we'll see what is being proposed by Hatch in terms of energy efficiency.
So
to allow them to maintain their LIHTC credits, which allows them to maintain or achieve your number one goal, and that's low and moderate income housing. Let's not forget that was the primary goal. It was the city staff who suggested, let's take a unique approach, let's take advantage of this and see if we can do something very innovative and combining the geothermal. We're finding it's very difficult now to accomplish both in a timely fashion and an economical fashion, given the bids we've received on lot 27.
So when Hatch goes about thinking about a response to this, will they have natural gas as an option to consider? Do we need to give them that as an option, or is it just between the geothermal and the air source heat pumps?
I think they'll propose something, so they'll move forward. And I don't know if they can meet the LIHTC requirements of energy efficiency with gas. I just don't know what they're talking about.
I don't know that you need to tell us what to do or not to do in terms of discussing their options, because we have to come back on the 14th and say this is what works or doesn't work.
They'll propose
So,
something.
I mean,
As of right now, geothermal is still in the requirements. So
in the development agreement.
yes.
Oh, the development agreement,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
yeah.
why we have to come back.
So they'll think those through, think about what options, whether it's gas or not, and whether it meets the LIHTC energy efficiency requirements. May not.
Do we know, is there a gas line in proximity of this property?
Vanessa, did you talk to the gas company?
Not directly, but we did kind of look at the neighborhood and neighbors, and there is gas, we believe, along South Wilmouth.
Okay, great, thanks.
So is that clear what we're recommending?
I think so. I mean, we're just sort of in a holding pattern until they have a chance to run the numbers.
But you're not giving us direction to rebid. That's the key.
Right.
What if, I think I'd entertain motions to direct staff, say we're to not rebid
Yeah, that'd be good.
and to essentially not pursue geothermal on lot 27, which is multifamily.
That'd be good direction for us for the record.
Then that way it's on the record and then it goes back to Hatch to make a decision on what they want to come back and propose.
I'll go ahead and move that.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
We have to do that. So now the question is, do we have to deal with 38, Mark? The construction, the temporary constructions, can we just not take action on that right now?
Yes, you can not take action on it. I mean, the reason we kept it on the agenda was like, what if the council said, no, we want geothermal, let's figure out a way to do it, right? And then we would go ahead. So we would have to have the temporary construction easement. If the council, and you have just now made a decision, you're abandoning the concept of geothermal, then there's no need for the temporary construction easement.
So Mark, is there any kind of a motion that we should have officially to, because I know 38 is on the agenda.
I think I think you can just pull it from the agenda, just like, I mean, if you want to do a motion to.
Okay, is there a motion to pull item
table it,
38?
yeah, or pull it, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, let's move on to item number 40, the ordinance amending chapter 28 of the code, establishing geothermal services and rules and charges.
So with this particular council action form, this is a first passage of an ordinance amending chapter 28. This is to set up and define the rates that we would charge for geothermal in the existing 26 lots in Baker subdivision. Also talks about ownership and then who has responsibilities for repair and maintenance.
So I have a question. In light of the conversation we just had, does that have implications for the rest of the subdivision in terms of the viability for geothermal?
In this particular case, all of the wells are in and they're all sized properly for these individual homes. And we are meeting the requirements needed to heat and cool those homes.
Okay. I have some questions, a question really about the additional cost for the lots. So do we have a sense of what the additional cost is per lot by having it hook up to geothermal?
As compared to
a lot that was a
gas?
gas. Mm-hmm.
I don't think that has from our standpoint, it has no impact on the price of the lot.
I think that's it.
You know what you're saying, the infrastructure cost for it. There is a claim that we're dealing with now, perhaps from Habitat, that it cost a little more, it was a little more expensive, and they're asking us to maybe reduce the cost of the lot by a certain amount, but we've not verified that cost, that reduction. You remember what that was?
I mean, I don't want to speak without being in, like I said, we haven't reviewed that in detail. We all know that it costs more than conventional because there's a payback for that. You have to invest up front to have the return in the long run. So we're not saying, we never claimed the geothermal was cheaper to install. We said it had a long-term payback that was a benefit to the community and to the owners.
Right.
But from a lot cost, literally the cost of the lot is no different because of the geothermal. The builder has a higher cost when they construct the home. So when Vanessa's had her lots appraised, they're appraised at market
Right.
value, and then we go from there to sell the lot.
But so we're the developer. So if we have lots that, if everything was equal, will cost more to develop because of the requirement of hooking up for infrastructure, it seems like we should want to understand that cost. So in other words, one lot over here, it's gas, this lot's geothermal. For someone to build a house on that and then incorporate the required equipment and infrastructure to make the geothermal work, that's going to be a higher price point. And we don't know what that delta is. Is that correct?
We don't know specifically because, again, each house will be sized differently, each piece of equipment, and you pick. We know it's more, but even right now, I hesitate to throw the range out. We can give you some information probably about what maybe the range is, the difference is, but each house will be somewhat different.
Unless we try to test it with, and no house is the same, it's tough to compare them. But again, I want to emphasize the thought being that there's a greater payback.
There is one other element that we're missing is that Ames Electric offers different incentives also. So if you go geothermal, you get extra incentives from Ames Electric to help defer some of those costs again.
Right.
So that's why it's kind of we didn't come here tonight to discuss the ins and outs of the different choices because there's a lot of moving parts between incentives, individual costs, preferences for what the payback is and what the long-term benefit is. We just don't have that in front of us tonight.
Well, and I think too, it's a policy decision on the council's part, right, to encourage sustainability because the status quo is cheaper, no doubt about it. Natural gas is cheaper, fossil fuels are cheaper than the more sustainable alternatives. But the commitment to sustainability is talking about the long-term costs of continuing with our status quo for the planet, right? So that's not a matter of, right, you said all things being equal, but they're not, right? And we know that natural gas use and other types of energy gotten in those ways, right? It has not served us well as a planet. And so part of council's commitment to sustainability are those factors too.
And although there is an upfront cost, the operational cost will be lower with a geothermal system than they would be with a traditional furnace. So yes, that was the whole intent is having the utility pay that upfront capital cost so that the affordable housing owners will have lower cost heating and cooling for the long term.
So Don, is there any kind of industry standard that the geothermal will achieve a 10% reduction or 20% reduction in utility costs?
There are, but again, I don't want to sit here and throw out numbers without sitting down and really analyzing it more closely for Iowa versus California and the size. There are many different factors before I just put out a number.
It seems that we should have some sense of these as the developer. Remind us, is it 12 or 16 market rate lots? I can't remember the number. 12 market rate lots. So if these 12 lots don't have geothermal, I don't think that that's going to collapse anything. My concern is that this subdivision, we bought this property in 2015, and there are no houses. And in the first quarter of this year, we had 4 housing permits. So I appreciate the ideological purity of this, and I voted in favor of it as well. But at some point, if we have information that what we're doing is going to make these lots very unattractive to the market, at some point as the developer, then those need to be factors. And I don't have a decision. I don't know because we don't have the numbers. What I would suggest is that we ask staff to gather information so that we can make a data-driven decision about how geothermal will impact the marketability of these lots.
I don't know how we can do that though, Tim, because we don't know who is going to be interested in the lots. You might have people who say, I am all in for saving the planet and being as sustainable as possible. Therefore, the geothermal makes the lots more marketable and more interesting to them. So I don't know how you get at marketability. I think you're operating from an assumption that people will always want to pay less up front, but there may be people who say, no, I would rather pay less on my utility bills going down the road.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think geothermal is the only market factor that might
No.
be preventing housing being built, right? We have a limited number of builders who are working on this type of housing, right? So their time is a limited resource as well. And with interest, I mean, there are other factors, right? And so I don't think it's just geothermal that's to blame for, a sluggish building pace.
Well, I think, Vanessa, you want to refresh, the city's been locked out of being able to sell the market rate lots because of the agreement with the federal government. Is that correct? Can you review what the stipulations are regarding that?
Well, the stipulations are, Mayor, is that when we sell a lot, that funds come back into our program. And so we have to be in a position to be able to expend that money immediately once it comes in. So we have been trying to concentrate on the affordable housing lots first and then selling the market rate lots later. So that's why Habitat has already purchased 8 lots and 3 houses are going up right now. And then once we get that stabilized and get our other programs up and running, we have a source to be able to spend the program income coming in from the sale of the market rate lots.
But wasn't it also that you couldn't just go out and put those market rate lots on the market without having an equal number of low LMI qualified housing? So technically right now you can only sell 3 market rate lots. Is that correct?
Well, the way HUD looked at it, they wanted to make sure that the affordable housing homes were established before we just went to the market rate homes.
Right. So the point is that you really haven't tested the market, because the point is they're not even on the market or haven't been on the market so far, the market rate lots, that is.
No, they have not.
So it's really
I
hard
mean,
to.
we've had people interested in buying a lot, but they haven't really determined whether they're qualify for a low income or market rate home.
Right.
It's just been an interest.
So just as an anecdotal point of reference, do we have a sense of what Habitat's difference is in their construction costs? I mean, they've been building lots of houses. It would be helpful to know what their additional costs would be. Do we know that?
We can get it. That's what I
we can
keep
get
saying.
them
We
for the
just
first
don't
3 houses.
have that in front of us. We can get you more information. We just don't have it for tonight.
Okay. that's fair.
Habitat could tell us
Okay, so
for their experience.
I'm going to call us back to the fact that the item on the agenda is actually talking about the ordinance establishing services, rules, and charges. So is there any questions or other comments? And then we can certainly entertain a motion on asking staff for additional information. Was there any other questions or comments on the ordinance that's proposed?
I have a question. Is it possible, I'm just thinking about this as first time out with geothermal in this community. One that we've already said is set aside for lower LMI. And so my question is about that $15 per month, which can seem small, But is there any opportunity to waive that? I'm thinking that they still have responsibility if anything goes wrong within the system that's on their lot, and whatever costs of using the geothermal. And I hear people saying that there are opportunities for rebates, but 8 years down the road, if there is something that goes wrong in their own system, I'm just thinking that even though $15 per month can seem low for these lots, is there an opportunity to waive that?
Council does have the right to waive that. I will point out that had we gone the traditional route, where it's air conditioning and forced air natural gas furnace, the natural gas company charges $13 a month today for just, again, it's just the customer charge. So that 13 is roughly the same. But beyond that, council does have the ability to modify how the rates are applied.
So as written, the ordinance says it's $15 unless by resolution the council sets a different fee. So the base fee is 15 unless you adopt through a resolution. You won't be waiving people's bills. You would be setting a different fee in the future for whatever circumstance you want to address. And that's how the ordinance is drafted.
The ordinance isn't just for these
Right.
15
Right.
homes. This is for any
geothermal.
in the future if we expand it, right?
No, it's for the 26 lots in Baker's subdivision.
only for that?
Yes.
Because
Written that way?
it's only applicable to city installed geothermal systems.
Okay, right.
And the fact is, we install these without any cost to the lot owners.
Correct.
So would we know if you take the investment that we made on the geothermal and divide that by the number of lots, what is the per lot subsidy for the geothermal that we've sunk in already?
So Don, there's two wells per lot.
Yep.
And what was the cost per well?
Well, I could do it a different way. We spent about $228,000 sinking all of the wells on the 26 lots.
I was thinking about
My
that.
calculator.
Right.
Yeah, it's about $8,000 per lot, roughly.
I mean, so there's already a pretty substantial benefit to the property owner with an $8,000 per lot subsidy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like a lot. All right. Is there any closing questions on this? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion on approval.
Do we need to take public comment on this one at all, John?
Mayor, I want to make one other comment, and this just because we were looking at in Bronwyn's, I guess when she sends out her council preview, I want to clarify it. So in her preview, she mentions that we'll maintain the equipment for 50 years, at which point the responsibility for maintenance will switch to the owner. That's actually incorrect.
Oh.
Our intentions were to promise that we will be there for at least 50 years, but we maintain ownership even beyond the 50 years. As opposed, we won't turn them over and say, okay, here you go. Here's 50-year-old wells. We continue to maintain them. We're saying that we're making the commitment we will be there for 50 years. We won't be turning them over to the homeowner at the 50-year point.
What would we do then instead? Just make a new commitment?
We would either look at the life of the existing wells, or we could sink new wells if required. But the reason why we can't simply turn those wells over to the homeowners is in many cases, those wells are not sitting on the homeowner's property.
Oh.
And so we have a difficulty there. We can't
I
give
thought maybe
somebody
if
a
you like
well
the
that's.
sidewalk, they would just be responsible for maintaining it.
The wells.
That becomes difficult because again, the wells are not on their property, so they'd have to go onto somebody else's property to maintain.
And there's the other issue is they're permitted as public wells. These are not private wells. So our permits that we have, this is for the city of Ames to operate it as a geothermal public utility system, essentially. So they will never be, I shouldn't say never, they're not going to be owned by individual lot owners. Ames Electric will always be responsible for them or to abandon them at the end of their life.
Okay.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We do read what you put out.
Great.
All right, we'll open public input on this item on the proposed ordinance establishing geothermal services, rules, and charges. Is there anyone that wishes to address council?
Hello again, Council. I have a unique blend of perspectives that may offer some context for you. So in my previous career, I worked for 9.5 years for Integrity Construction as a project manager, where I built several homes. I didn't personally, but managed the construction of several homes that had geothermal systems and walked customers through the process and the trade-offs and the benefits of having a geothermal system. So I think there's some things that should be factored into your discussion, whether I go into those tonight and give you a few of them. But I think also it would be beneficial to get the perspective of some contractors that install these systems. Habitat certainly will have a perspective on the difference between the typical system that they install and the geothermal system, on that delta between the costs there. When I was managing homes, given these were not affordable homes, these were more high-end homes, but the total cost difference was about $30,000, including the wells. I don't know so I've been in my new role here for about 2.5 years. And so I don't know what those costs have done. They have not gone down, I don't think. But the alternative technologies have also gotten better. We talked about air source heat pumps and things like that. So I did want to offer one piece of perspective. So say if the difference between a standard gas system and a geothermal unit was $15,000, just for the sake of argument, and the savings per month was $100 on their bill. So that would be 150 months to pay off the difference in that savings, which equates to 12.5 years for an affordable home to recoup the cost of the upfront cost of a geothermal system. So yes, there is a payback, but it's not a short time frame in a payback. So those numbers may be different, but that's a way to think about it in the perspective of somebody that we're targeting for an affordable home. They won't necessarily have the capital up front or the luxury of paying something off over time with that much of a capital investment. So there are lots of different ways to think about the affordability. There's lots of elements that go into that metric. Utility costs are one. So when we were building homes in the Midland Power District, they have some unique programs with dual metering and different rates for systems that heat and cool your home. So the geothermal system would be connected to one meter, and your lights and refrigerator would be connected to another meter, and you would pay a different rate. And so the payback was shorter than other utilities like our friends at Alliant Energy. Their rates are a little different. They didn't have the multi-meter system. The payback was much longer. So there are a lot of factors that go into that. Don, I'm sure, is very aware, and Don and I have spoken on this topic as well. And so I would, as you look at the requirement, especially for the single-family home lots and the affordable home lots for connecting to the geothermal system, consider options to help offset those upfront costs to ultimately the homeowner. That would be beneficial. On my economic development side, I've been talking with 2 developers that are...
Dylan?
Yes.
I think some of your comments might be more appropriate for item 41.
Oh.
This
Okay.
is regarding the ordinance itself, establishing the rates and policy. We will have public input on that one as well too. So do you have any comments regarding the ordinance itself?
I do not. I'll save my comments then.
Yeah, we'll have you come back up on
Okay.
item number 4. All right, thank you for your comments. So anybody else have any comments regarding the ordinance? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion on first passage of the ordinance amending Chapter 28, establishing geothermal services and rules and charges therefore?
Move on first.
Second.
Thank
So
you.
I have a question, Don. So is there a timing aspect of this first passage? In other words, we've had some questions raised about the due diligence and understanding some of the implications of this. If we were to hold off and wait to get more information, would that be a delay that would have any kind of negative consequences?
I am a little concerned about habitat. If you'll remember back in March at your 26th meeting, we had this easement agreement with Hatch and Habitat to get the GeoWell permits finalized. And we let you know that Habitat's trying to close on their first home sale in May. And we laid out that we would be bringing this ordinance forward. And the thought was we wanted to have everything clear for the time that Habitat sells that home, what they were buying in terms of a geothermal system and commitment from the city. So the ordinance is one of the things that needs to be done. We also have a specific agreement that we're going to come back in relation to some of the habitat lots. There are a little more details than just what the ordinance has. They mirror each other. They're consistent in terms of what we discussed with habitat in the ordinance. Delaying for a little while is not necessarily a bad thing, but we really expected to get this done so that buyer was very well aware of what they were getting as a property and how the geothermal system was going to be done and managed by the city.
Roll call.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, move on. Item number 41, resolution amending restrictive covenants for Baker subdivision.
So this change is in relation to both the ordinance and what I just referenced for Habitat for Humanity. In our discussions with Habitat, again, not having an ordinance in place, we had to discuss with them what we expected to be the operational parameters of the geothermal system and how some of these things were going to work. And right now, the covenants require that all lots, single-family lots, connect to and utilize the geothermal system. What we're saying in this covenant is that's going to get modified. Instead of being in perpetuity, there is an option for a homeowner to end that participation at 10 years. So that's something that we had already discussed with Habitat as a proposal. It's also in the ordinance. It would apply to everybody. So this needs to be done to line up with the ordinance that says that.
So pragmatically, let's say we're at year 10 and the homeowner finds that this is not the geothermal is not attractive and they want to find a plan B. What options would they have at that point? I mean,
If they want
realistically,
to disconnect from the geothermal system
and they want to have heat,
then they would have to look at an electric source, or if they happen to be on Wilmouth, maybe they could connect to the existing natural gas line.
I'm just trying to understand how pragmatically possible it is. Legally, they can disconnect after 10 years, but pragmatically, what options realistically do they have? And so this equipment to run the geothermal is large and it's a pretty involved device in the house. And so this would have to be removed and a new system installed. Am I correct on that?
Well, actually, when you start looking at air source heat pumps, the equipment is very, very, very similar. So they could go to an air source heat pump at a reasonable cost if they chose to stay off of or move off of the geothermal.
Okay.
If you move to natural gas, traditional forced air furnace and stuff like that, that would be a more sizable cost.
Okay, thank you.
But I think to Tim's point, is that the lifespan of the equipment should be 15, 20, 25 years. And so after 10 years, it would seem, especially for someone who's on a very limited income, to go in totally unfeasible to tear out, an expensive piece of equipment to put in a brand new piece of equipment. So I think that's your point.
Correct.
And now if it had aged out, it needed to be replaced at that point, maybe they would go ahead and do a deep dive on the economics of both ones. But I think that the ones on the market rate lots are the ones that are going to, in that cul-de-sac, they're the ones that will really have difficulty because there's no gas line out there in terms of getting gas to it. If they wanted to do gas, to them. The ones on Wilmouth would be might be a little easier, horizontally boring underneath the street and trying to get gas.
That'd be good. We're not promising you can access it on Wilmouth. We
Understand.
don't know that.
I understand. Very good point. Yeah. If it is there and if if Alliant is willing to allow that extension, then that might be an option, but that's.
And again, with the 10 years, this is more to give the homeowner that option. We're planning on being there for 50 plus years. The equipment, as the mayor pointed out, has a much longer lifetime than just 10 years. But there was a desire to have some, well, what if? So this was not necessarily something that we chose and wanted to put in. It was more to give choices after the first 10 years.
Well, let's play this out. If choice is a value proposition that we agree to, what would be the downside of offering that choice from day one? So they build the house and they say, look, I don't want to spend an extra X number of dollars. I'd rather just do something conventional and get a lower priced house.
Well, the alternative to the amendment that's being proposed right now is our current restrictive covenant that council has already actually discussed. And so the alternative to setting an end date, right, is what's in place now, which we already discussed and voted on. And that's just a restrictive covenant with no end date. So I'm not sure exactly if you want us to rehash a discussion we already had. I'm just not sure that this item, I mean, again, because the alternative to this amendment is the restrictive covenant that we already put in place.
Well, you're sort of changing my hypothetical. My point was that this offers people choices. And I'm just saying if we value choice, why wouldn't we give people that opportunity? There may be people, to your point, that would say we value sustainability enough that we're willing to pay the extra money for the geothermal. They have the freedom to do that. But why not give them the choice and let those people out there, let the market decide what is important to them, give them the choice. They have so many dollars to spend. If we value choice, why not build this in from the beginning?
But to Brown's point, council's already decided, already moved forward. It's already in place. And so that's going to basically unwind the restricted covenants, completely. And there's no, so I mean, I think that I agree with Brown that the topic right now on the table is, do you modify the covenant? And then if there is a desire, if you want to make a motion to revisit the whole agreement, that would have to basically be brought up and see if there's a second and support for that.
We didn't have this information then. And now we have this information about the concerns of the additional costs of geothermal. We can saddle these people with this, or we can think about this. I would like to get more information and make an informed decision. I think we're blindly moving into this without really understanding the costs that we're saddling people with.
Okay. All right. We'll open up public comment. Dylan, do you want to offer any more comments?
Just want to quickly land the plane with the economic development perspective. I've got two developers that are interested in building on lots in the Baker subdivision. Both of them have identified the geothermal additional cost as a barrier to entry in wanting to develop in that area. And so they're both developers that have worked in the affordable housing space in other communities in Iowa, have not had the barrier of building a geothermal system, and both had brought up, because they're experienced builders, the additional cost that was going to then either price them out of the target market or eliminate them from potential housing tax credits that are available with a barrier of with a limit of construction cost. And so I think there's some concerns there for contractors wanting to purchase and develop on those lots with the risk of the geothermal system. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. I'm sorry. One more thing. As the chair of the Home Builders Association, I wanted to offer our members would be happy to give some perspective on this. We had brought a group of contractors together to discuss with Don and Deb on the climate action plan and some ideas there. And I felt like that was a productive conversation to offer some real world boots on the ground context for some of the ideas. And so I would be happy to convene that group again, or a subsection of that group to offer some perspective on costs and of geothermal systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to offer input? All right, seeing none, we'll close public input. Closing comments, questions for staff?
Was this something that Habitat, I'm thinking about that we want to be a good community partner. Is this something that would lead us to continuing to be a good community partner?
And you're asking about the 10-year part,
Yes,
so
the
so
10-year
covenants would be
part.
good for 21 years. If we do nothing, someone else could extend them, right? If we wanted to. In our discussions, they just wanted, right? We had no draft ordinance. What's the expectation? And we agreed as staff that a 10-year expectation is we thought was a good starting point. We've made an investment. We wanted to recoup that investment. We had a purpose for sustainability, that we wanted people to utilize the system. If it doesn't work for them at 10 years, we said, fine. We as staff can accept that someone might want to replace that system if it went bad and do something else. That was our approach to that conversation. And 10 years was just a number that worked for us, and Habitat thought that was reasonable, right? They're not representing any one party here. We're just working with them because they have the first 3 homes that will be sold.
Okay, thank you.
But again, I think, to be honest, you're trying to combine 2 goals here. If you would ask Habitat right now in the future, houses, would they want to put geothermal in there? They would probably say no.
Correct.
I don't know if that persuades you or not, but it's tough to meet both goals, is what I'm saying. Affordable housing and geothermal, there's a little bit of a clash here.
All right.
So we'll come back with a agreement that we hope they can move ahead with.
But we have already invested a great deal.
Yeah.
So, okay,
But
thanks.
if you find yourself in a hole, you stop digging. And that's my concern, is that we haven't done our due diligence. We don't have information to make a thoughtful decision. And I will vote for this only because it gives people an out after 10 years. But I think we should give consumers an option. And if we're really concerned about affordable housing, this is not moving us in the right direction. My goal is affordable housing primary, and I am very concerned from what we've learned from Habitat, this is moving us in the wrong direction.
Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. Move on to item number 42, hearing on sale of land at 321 State Avenue within the Baker subdivision, now known as 3216 Tripp Street. I declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on the sale of the land at 321 State Avenue? Seeing none, declare a public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion on resolution approving option agreement for the sale of Lot 27 to Townhomes at Creekside, LLLP, an Iowa Limited Liability Partnership affiliated with Hatch Development Group, in conjunction with Low Income Housing Tax Credit LIHTC application for multifamily housing development.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 43, resolution approving reduced parking for affordable housing, 207 Sherman Avenue, South Sherman Avenue, excuse me.
Enjoy your night. Eloise is going to present this one. It's our first affordable housing parking reduction. You recently adopted this ordinance this winter, so this is the first request. You may remember that you gave staff certain levels of authority where we can approve them ourselves, but then there's certain circumstances as described in this report where you can come to council and ask for greater parking relief as requested by the Bridge Home.
Good evening. This item is for the reduced parking for the property at 207 South Sherman. The site plan is up on the screen. You may recall, you will recall that you adopted an ordinance in December that allows for reducing parking standards for affordable housing developments. The Bridge Home is under construction, and it was developed with a remote parking agreement because it could not accommodate all of the required parking on their site at 207. There are 13 spaces on this site. So with the new ordinance, there are several options for them for reducing their parking because they are offering housing for extremely low incomes at or below 30% of AMI. The requested option is to totally eliminate the remote parking requirement that was provided across the street. Kind of hard to see maybe this graph. So this is 207 South Sherman. The property across the street is 214. And it's the site that's currently, we have plans that have been submitted to the city now for that site. But they had an existing parking lot that they were going to provide 26 spaces for this property at 207. If that's eliminated, that will allow the property at 214 to move forward without having to have that remote parking in place. So several options are available. One would be instead of reducing the full required remote parking of 26 spaces, it could be reduced to 21 spaces because of their access to transit proximity. But we believe that the 13 spaces that they do have on site would support what is needed at the site because of transit, walkability of the neighborhood, availability of on-street parking, and the service of extremely low-income households, which traditionally have very low car ownership rates. So we would ask that you support alternative 1, which would eliminate the current remote parking agreement and allow the 13 spaces on site to be sufficient.
Thank you, Eloise. Questions?
I'm very excited about the Bridge Homes project, and I wanted to follow up with Jody Stumbo to understand better her rationale for this, because ultimately, people who are living in this area, frankly, will need cars in order to get good jobs. So there's no Cyride out to Danfoss. There's no Cyride out to 3M. And so a car is a pathway out of poverty for many people. And so I wanted to make sure that she had thought through that piece. And I got a great email from her. And there's just a lot of thoughtfulness that went into this proposal. So I'm very comfortable in supporting this decision. I think it makes sense in this project. It's different than situations where we've had high student populations, and they just have different needs than people that we want to eventually find ladders out of poverty into stability, and the cars play an important role in that.
Any other questions or comments? I'll open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council on this topic? If you state your name and then you may start.
Thank you, Mayor. Sherry Riley, I work for the Bridge Home. I live outside Story City. I'm just here to see if there were any other additional questions. We did field Councilman Garton's question earlier today, so.
Any questions for the applicant? Apparently not.
Well, thank you very much for considering it. We are excited to provide these 18 units of very low income housing for a long time to come.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address council? All right, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
Move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to item number 44, collection procedures for past due parking tickets and utility counts.
Good evening again. We are here to present some alternatives for some collection procedures for our utility billing and parking tickets. We discussed this back in January, and council ultimately approved two agreements, one with the DOT and Story County, the Story County Treasurer, and also the Iowa Department of Revenue, who manages the set-off program. So I think at the previous meeting, there was some discussion about how do we affect primarily habitual violators and prevent putting disadvantaged individuals in a situation where paying for parking tickets and past utility bills has a detrimental financial impact. So what we've provided today in the council packet, along with the council action form, was some procedures that we prepared based on some of the programs that are offered by the state. And then also tonight I have with me is John Odenwiller. He's our accounts utility supervisor. And John was able to pull some parking ticket data that also supported that. And I'll kind of let John run through some of that data that might help you guys, give you some background. Excuse me.
So after our last meeting, we went back and looked at what we would consider a reasonable amount of tickets to possibly waive. And then we also related that to a dollar amount. When we're looking at tickets issued since January 1 of 2022, we currently have just under 8,500 outstanding still. And that's for a total of $167,885. When we go back and look at those by plates, we have 3,744 individual plates. I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you here, but less than $50, $50 or less, make up the number of plates that make up that equate for 84.5% of all of those plates. So per our procedures here, those would not be collected or pursued for collection at this time. There's a variety of ways to get there, different types of tickets, but then we could go collect on that additional 15.5%. And that additional 15.5% that's over $50 equates for actually 57% of the total outstanding money, which is about $96,000.
So I think our concept was, in coming up with the dollar figure that we recommended in the procedures, was how do we affect the least amount of people but pursue habitual violators and still stay within the guidelines of the programs that we entered into agreement with. And so ultimately we settled on about $50 as a minimum amount that we would pursue utilizing these two programs. And I think also in the procedures, we noted that we would work with individuals in the event that they find themselves in a financial situation where they're unable to make those, I guess, financial obligations to the city, with a thought process being that we'd, just like our utility bills, past due utility bills and payment arrangements, we would enter into a 12-month agreement where they would make monthly payments. We would allow for auto registration renewals at that time, but prevent the future renewal. So we would allow you to enter into an agreement. We'd allow you to renew your vehicle registration. In a year, we would check and see how you're doing, because there would still be a hold on that vehicle registration, but then we could have some dialogue with the license plate holder about how that arrangement was working out. So that's ultimately what we settled on. John provided some good financial, I guess, statistics for us to kind of make sure that we were still in compliance. Like I said, we want to minimize the impact on as many people as possible, but still really go after those habitual violators and make sure that the parking enforcement and parking fund are recovering the costs of enforcing parking. So I think that's kind of all we have to present tonight.
So help us with a cost benefit analysis. So you make a very compelling case on the revenue side, but can you give us a sense of the cost of of doing this?
So if we use the measures we're pursuing, it would actually lower our cost because currently we're paying 25% to the parking ticket collection company that we partner with. By utilizing the registration stops, there would be no cost. And then if we do pursue it through the state, I believe that's a $7 charge per recovery. And again, we're currently paying 37% on the utility billing collections.
And so just to clarify, in your calculus, you can save the taxpayer dollars. You've got some friends up here, but is that taking into account staff time?
So there would be some additional staff time for processing reports. However, in working with our IT department, we're trying to automate as much of this as possible. So there'd be limited staff time.
So as we understand it, we would be one of the few cities in partnership with the DOT who auto loads all of our tickets and registrations into their system. And there would be a file transmittal back and forth. And then ultimately it would be somewhat automated. We would, of course, if we're using both the programs, make sure that if somebody paid using the set-off program, we would remove them from the parking ticket piece. So there's a little administrative piece, but a majority of it in terms of adding people and subtracting people would be automated through that system with the DOT.
Well, it sounds like you've done your due diligence, and we can always come back and revisit this after a year and see how it's working. Okay.
Other questions?
So as I understand it, this would only be for either residents of Story County or state of Iowa license plates. So if it's a Iowa State student with an Illinois car, is there any method that we could use to recover those?
So we can still send to our collection agency that we're utilizing now. And we plan to utilize that for out of state since these other programs would not help with those.
Gotcha.
Emily?
I'm just wondering, when we're looking at the out-of-state parking tickets, do you guys have a number for kind of what percentage within Story County or within the city of Ames, what percentage of the parking tickets issued are from out-of-state vehicles?
Overall, I could get that number for you. Out of these 8,500 tickets, just over 3,000 of them are from Story County. 1,200 of them are from out of state.
Okay, that's a pretty significant number. So that obviously implicates Iowa State students. So I just kind of wanted to get that figure there. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, it could be it could be parents coming. It could be
Visitors,
people
yeah.
coming for game day as well too. So we don't want to throw the students under the bus. I am curious though to follow up on what Emily is that. So of the number that you said exceeded $50, how many of those are out of state? Because those are going to have to be still a collection agency. See what I'm saying?
Sure. Yep. I do not have that number with me here, but I can certainly get that for you as well.
Yeah. Because that'd be really, I mean, and I think just for the record, council and city is not interested in being punitive, but there's a violation of an ordinance, and these fines are in place to try and make sure that parking is properly monitored. And this money is going to help offset our parking fund in terms of working on maintenance and repairs and improvements. So it's being put to use specifically for the vehicles that are being cited as well too. But it'd be just curious in terms of how successful we'll get. If if the remainder is really big or out of state, which it makes it a little more maybe harder to get the money out.
Yeah.
No, we didn't offer more aggressive techniques, and some cities, as you know, boot vehicles, some tow. For that category, we can look at that for those out of state tickets. I think we can check our records as the enforcement agent goes through and see the outstanding bills and where they're from. It's a more drastic approach, but that's how you can get to them. I don't want you to think collection is that successful. I don't know of the accounts what percentage they actually succeed with collecting anything. Do you have a fact?
Our utility recovery is about 30%.
30%.
Is pretty good for
Anything on parking tickets?
parking tickets. Is not as successful, but I don't have the exact number.
Yeah. And the reason it's important for the parking fund, that's the one fund we were a little concerned about. Remember, breaking even, revenues equal expenses. We certainly don't look forward to coming to you and saying raise meter fees or rental fees, parking fees or fines. So being successful in collecting revenue, outstanding revenue that's due us, is a very important and I think a more appropriate alternative right now than raising fees. So I appreciate Corey bringing this forward, John working on this, a way to improve our revenue without raising fees.
John, do you have any information on delinquent utility accounts? You talked about parking.
I do. So right now in total in collections and write-off status, so it goes to collections first, and after about 3 months, we put it in write-off status. It's continued to be collected on roughly up to 5 years, but after about that first year, your success rates go way down. So right now we have 901 individual accounts for $335,000 out there, which based off of we went back to the same timeline there as beginning of 2022. Based off our 30,000 accounts a year, it's about 1.29% of accounts that go to collections.
Any idea how many of those are out-of-state residents or?
We kind of lose track if they don't provide us with a forwarding address. A lot of them do remain in state, just other cities.
All right, any questions? Open up public input on this item. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this particular proposed collection procedures? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Is there a motion on resolution approving collection procedures for past due utility accounts and parking fines and authorizing staff to begin utilizing vehicle registration stops and the state's set-off program?
Move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item number 45.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm here, Rich Higgins, Ames Fire Department. Tonight I'm here asking for the council to waive the formal purchasing policies, and award contract for the purchase of a new replacement fire engine for Engine 2. Back in 2021, we had a fleet team get together and develop specifications for a new fire engine. As you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts on a fire engine and a lot of design and work that goes into making sure we have the right apparatus for the next 25 years, because essentially that's what we're buying is 15 years as a frontline and then another 10 years as a reserve apparatus. When that team designed that engine, our hope was that we'd be able to use it as a standard specification moving forward for all future fire engine purchases, including our tower truck that we just purchased not that long ago. What that does is having all apparatus the same is that you can move one driver from one station to the next, and the apparatus that they pump, they drive, it functions exactly the same, whether it's hitting the lights up top or if it's getting out and selecting the right type of line that you want to get water to pump. So we came up with that specification, so we're excited that we're able to use that again. Hence, we went, if you recall, back in March, I came to you asking for permission to go with Sourcewell, which is a cooperative purchasing authority. And what Sourcewell does is they solicit national bids through an RFP that goes out to every fire engine apparatus manufacturer with the standard specification, giving them the opportunity to bid on that apparatus. And then what it allows us to do as the purchasing authority is to go out and select the vendor that's going to meet our specifications, saving time and energy of staff. Instead of trying to redesign another fire engine, we already have a standard specification, which makes the process really smooth and actually saves us a little bit of money on the back end with that too, in addition to staff's time. So tonight I'm here asking for funding to waive the formal purchasing policies and to move forward with the contract to Reliant Fire Apparatus for the $1,019,302. And that would leave us in our capital improvement plan for 25, 26. We have a little over $1,071,499 set aside. And part of that is not only for the replacement of engine 2, but also to refurbish current engine 2 that we have right now. We don't know what those exact costs are going to be just yet. We had 125,000 set aside. That's an estimate. We'll refine that further as we get closer to actually refurbing that apparatus, which won't happen until after engine 2 is replaced. I think I shared with you last time I was here that engine manufacturing times are out 46 to 49 months still. So even though this isn't identified in this year's capital improvement plan, it's in 25, 26, we can award contract but not make a payment until the apparatus is actually manufactured and we take delivery of the apparatus, which wouldn't be until 46 to 49 months from the day we award contract.
I just have one question. So this is a little bit different in that normally we put out the specs for a bid and we let bidders offer bids to those specs. But am I reading this correctly that here utilizing Sourcewell for the purchase of a new fire engine at a cost of $1,019,302? So does that create, are we telling Sourcewell that that's the highest we're willing to pay, and then bidders are willing to bid that down? How does that work?
Yeah, so what Sourcewell does is they put together an RFP. They say we want a fire engine that seats 5 with a 1,500 gallon per minute pump. And then they put that out for bid nationally. People come back with their bids. And then what that allows us to do is go through and select which vendor can meet our specifications that we already have. And that's where we've selected Reliant Fire Apparatus that meets our specifications for
I see.
previous.
And
So
the
it's
bids are established already.
correct.
for
Yep.
session.
So they've already taken all the bids. It's similar to a state bid for tires or anything that the states bid out. This has already been bid. It just allows us to take advantage of the work they've already put in without us having to go out and rebid.
So I apologize, I said that sort of backwards. So we did set out the criteria and this was the result.
Correct.
All
Yep.
right, I apologize. Yep. Cool, thanks.
Other questions? Rich, given the fact that it won't be delivered for 4 years, is this a hard number or is there some kind of clause that, oh, by the way, if our material costs go up, labor costs go up, the engine cost goes up?
Yeah. So with this contract, it does have the ability that they could come back and they could say that, hey, the cost for an engine has gone up substantially. We've had it reviewed by legal. It seems like that is contract language that they're seeing in other contracts. However, in talking with the vendor and in the contract language, we do have the ability, that'd be considered a change order. So we'd have the ability to cancel the order or work with the vendor to renegotiate that price if there is a price increase. They have some concerns over going 4 years out as well, especially after COVID.
Well, yeah, it seems to be a pretty obvious risk that they would not want to assume. I just didn't know if it's better to purchase it at this point in time, knowing that they may be able to tweak it, because they got a captive audience, so to speak, or bid it. But then the point is, you're going to always be playing this game of you're still 4 years out, and
Right.
it's a conundrum essentially to be in.
It is, we just keep pushing that ball 4 years out, and there is a cost increase that'll come out in May. However, this locks into a price until we go to do the final drawing approval. So there's a lot of things that would have to happen in order for a price increase. It's just not, their reputation's on the line. So that's something that they have not done before, but something that they have in their contract per their legal advisors.
Okay, very good. All right, well, public comment. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this particular item? See none, we'll close public input. Is there a motion on resolution waiving the city's purchasing policy requirement for competitive proposals and approving contract with Reliant Fire Apparatus, Inc. through Sourcewell for the purchase of a new fire engine in the amount of $1,019,302?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Before you go, Council, if I could indulge for a second. We have reports for governing bodies, and Story County Emergency Management Agency is one of them. And Rich filled in for me last week, and it only meets quarterly. So if we could just give a quick snapshot in terms of what all, not all the details, but just kind of what went on. And I just want to commend Rich and his team. I'm actually the most spoiled mayor of the 13 different mayors, because when they talk about emergency planning, Rich has got it covered. And then Iowa State also is a great partner, also with that too. But I just thank you for what you do. And he always says, sure, I'm happy to fill in for you if I need to. So if you want to just give us a quick update of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. So we met last week, and one of the things that Story County Emergency Management is looking at is expanding their emergency operations center. It is in the confines of the administration building in the basement. It's a small room that fits 20 people, really compact. It's not ideal for running an emergency operations center. Our incident command center is probably 5 times that we have here through the water plant. So we went over and we toured a new proposed location that the Story County owns, the Mosaic Building in Nevada over by Burke. And what they're looking to do is to take the EOC out of the basement of the admin building and move it over into this new facility, which would increase their footprint, I think, about 5 times over, which would be great for emergency operations. We went over, toured that building, discussed some options of what would need to be done to retrofit that, to bring that up to speed. County is working with their feasibility coordinator to evaluate that and working on a master plan for some other offices that would be located over there as well. Story County Emergency Management also has a reserve emergency fund of $200,000. The mayors voted at that meeting that night to use $100,000 of it to go towards the development of the EOC's new location. And just for perspective, when Melissa, the Story County Emergency Manager, reached out to other jurisdictions to see what type of emergency capacity they usually had on hand, $100,000 was the top end that counties had for emergency. So the mayors and myself that voted, and the Story County Sheriff felt that was a comfortable position to be in, since we haven't dipped into that fund for as long as I've been here.
You want to explain how that fund is used or what the purpose is?
Yeah, it's really to assist the county if there was any catastrophic emergency, to get us by until we could get some type of federal reimbursement, FEMA funding back from a natural disaster. We just haven't had to dip into that fund yet.
I have not yet arranged it, but thought about having Melissa and maybe Rich come to a council meeting and just give you a little snapshot of what she does. It seems like it's kind of a hidden behind the scenes that, boy, you need it when you have the train derailment a couple of years ago, that was, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, out here, or we have the accident or the blizzard on the interstate or whatever. They don't do all the work, but they do a lot of coordination. And but I think it'd be a great snapshot into what goes on and how much planning goes in, because the worst scenario would be is having a train derailment of hazardous materials close to campus or close to downtown. What are you going to do? And they've got strategies in place and how to activate.
It's what we plan for.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, you never need to use your plans, but anyway.
I hope not. Keep them on the bookshelf.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for Rich?
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Rich, and also to your team for all the work you guys do on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, move on to item number 46, second reading of ordinance. I entertain a motion on second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 28 of the Municipal Code, Section 283043, to increase sanitary sewer rates by 7% for bills due on or after July 1, 2024.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Move on to item number 47, entertain motion on second reading of an ordinance on appointment criteria for boards and commissions.
Move on. Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And item 48, entertain a motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4525 for the citywide designation of the urban revitalization area.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we have one disposition of communication to council. It's a email from Chuck Wickelblack regarding the Dayton Avenue development and TIF reimbursement.
I think you should refer that to staff for a memo so we can explain it to you.
Will we refer it to staff?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, item 49, any reports of meetings that have been held on Ames Convention Visitors Bureau since last time?
Yes. So we had a board meeting actually out at the Nevada Fieldhouse. So it was great to tour that facility and see the different recreation that Nevada has to offer now. One exciting news that we had at the board meeting was we approved an additional 0.5% of the hotel motel tax fund to go to a special community grant fund. So we already set aside 5% by our ordinance for community grants, but this one would be more for an off-cycle event or a new event that wouldn't necessarily meet the deadline the year before to submit for a community grant. So we're going to start off the fund with some revenue that we got from Ragbri, and then that additional 0.5% will go in there every year to try to help new events start up in Ames.
Anything else to add?
I could add something, although I'm no longer on the board. I met with Kevin Burke and Matt Beatty and Dr. Toya Younger, who's the Senior Vice President for Student Affairs at Iowa State, to discuss the potential to bring the International Town and Gown Association Conference back to Ames and likely in 2027. And Dr. Younger was very supportive about that and very enthusiastic about it. So the discussions are going to continue. And I think the Discover Ames folks are going to try and fit it in between their mega years in order to ensure that we are not overburdening our hotels.
Very good. Thank you. How about AEDC?
AEDC met in Boone, and the big news was that Boone is getting a Daisy sour cream and cottage cheese factory, if you want to call it that. I'm not sure what to call it. It's a $627 million facility that may bring 255 jobs to the community. But what I found interesting was that the city, in order to attract this business, is having to spend several $1 million to expand their sewer plant and their water reservoir, and to ensure that the infrastructure that's available is present. So as we are receiving the information on companies that are interested in Ames, I think it's worthwhile for us to consider what those costs are anytime we look at a large manufacturing facility like this.
Thank you. Transit.
Yeah, we met on the 18th. I think the highlights from that meeting, we talked about, HERDA has an annual customer survey, so we talked about that. And I don't know if you all know how that works, but SIRIDE is obligated by the federal government and the funding we get from that to comply with the ADA by providing door-to-door service for residents who need that and can't use the traditional transit system. And so we contract with HERDA to provide those services. And again, this was just the annual customer survey. For the most part, good satisfaction, I think. And then the SIRIDE staff and HERDA have been in conversations about anything that would need looking at. So that was good. 2 new bus shelters, about $28,000 a piece, in places that don't currently have bus shelters. So that's good. More shelters is good. And then we talked too about applying for state a state transit grant to ultimately replace. Well, we submitted the application for 12 buses, but there was some discussion about whether we would apply for fewer than 12 or the full 12. And we did vote to apply for all 12, which would mean that the last 3 get replaced with more battery electric buses. But that's a ways out in the future. So no, they're not imminent or anything like that. That's about all the highlights from that meeting.
Thank you. All right, council comments. Emily, this is time we set aside for each member to offer any comments they might have, things that might be of interest to council and the community. So, or Iowa State University. Again, welcome aboard. We're thrilled to have you, and we'll just give you the privilege of starting out tonight.
We generally tell our most embarrassing moment.
Oh,
That's
right.
what we do our first time.
Of course. Okay.
Just kidding.
I'll get right on that. Well, I just would like to recognize Martin and Quinn are here, the president and vice president-elect for student body government. And then the other things I have to say is I'll be leading the local affairs committee within student government. So I will have more information about student wants, needs, insights on our agenda items in the future. Also, I will be on the SciRide Board of Trustees. So we're going to work together even more. And I'm trying to think of, I think that's pretty much it. I don't have much for you guys today.
All right, very good. Welcome. All right.
Thank you.
That one.
I don't have much. I thought Grant Olson's question was an interesting one, just, in light of the bike pedestrian master plan, like when we start that and why wouldn't we start looking at the roads we're doing now, I guess. So I guess I was just hoping maybe for a memo from staff addressing his question that he posed during.
And which question?
His question during public forum was
The one project on Highland?
with the Highland
Just Highland.
redesign, are we taking any steps to improve the bicycle facilities along Highland? So
As proposed in the plan, you mean?
yeah, or I guess so. Yeah, just a memo from staff on that question. If
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so I think he also asked about conducting a protected bike facility
like a temporary
for 3
months,
months, something like that.
Yeah, so maybe
Is that something that you were is that part of the motion, or is that separate from the motion?
Well, I guess my motion is just to have staff give us a memo about with the Highland Avenue redesign, are we taking any steps to improve the bicycle safety along that corridor?
Okay, all right. And
As proposed in the,
Yes.
as recommended in the plan? Is that your
Is it done yet?
No.
So that's, I guess,
Right.
they just started the drawings.
This one-
They started design.
sure.
So, yeah.
So maybe just their thoughts on
Okay.
that.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Is there anything regarding the protected bike facility? He talked about just kind of, I'm not advocating for or against it, but it's more or less that was a specific request.
If staff have thoughts about that concept, either,
You could be wrapped into the memo. then.
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right.
So you want us to add that? Was that on the same spot or any place? Was that on the-
No, it was
it's on
only in
Highland.
Highland.
still in Highland?
Yeah.
Just kind
So rather, the thoughts about delaying doing the project and just doing a temporary project instead as a test and not,
What I heard him ask was just pushing a pause on the design.
Yeah.
Just doing a 3-month trial of protected bike facility that you'd have both bike lanes on one side and then you'd have.
is that what you want us to do?
But I
Yeah,
just,
I'm just curious what staff's thoughts are on that concept.
Yeah.
If they're like, no way, we can't hit pause because of this reason or that reason, then I'd like to know that. But if
We
staff
don't
are
know
like,
what the design they're proposing is, it could be safer than what we have too,
Yeah.
without having to do a trial.
yeah, and so I guess, yeah, just I would be curious staff's thoughts on that.
Did you get the second part? So in lieu of the safety, or maybe both, what the design contemplates now in the project for safety, but also in lieu of moving ahead with the design.
Do they
Would
think
you-
there's
do
any
this
value
temporary,
in that,
whatever
or,
it
you
is.
know, or would that impede the project in some way that?
And that temporary one is a separated path,
Well, I
protected area?
don't, I think that it's.
Sometimes safety.
Just want to make
for
sure
the
I get what you
temporary
want.
thing, I think could be up, there's some design elements of that Grant didn't answer all of that.
Right,
It wasn't
right.
like it needs to, the temporary thing needs to look like this. It was just like, why don't we try
Test something
try
before
a
you do it
test
permanent.
before we, yeah.
That's the concept, right?
Uh-huh.
However, your motion is not push pause on the design. It's more or less to give a memo in terms of what will be the feasibility of that, and or are you doing other things even better?
Yes.
That's my understanding of your motion is.
Exactly.
It's not stop design and try for 3 months.
Well, I thought you were asking if
Unless,
that's possible.
unless for some reason, if staff hear that concept and they're like, oh, okay, that maybe, I mean, if staff like that idea, then maybe they would want to pause the
So,
design.
is that part of the motion?
I feel like we've got it.
Carly's got it then, right?
She's good.
Oh, Carly.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's all.
Nina?
So, Mr. Burnham.
Do we got to vote on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Yep.
We did vote on it.
Oh, did we?
I don't
we
remember
say-
voting on it.
Not the
Oh,
adding
we
on the
did.
temporary one.
The added stuff, yeah.
We did add.
All right. So you made the motion. Is there a second to the addition?
Second.
All right. Those fair of the amendment to the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now I can say there's a full moon tonight. I can blame it on that for right now. Okay.
Thank you. That's exactly what's going on.
Blame it on something else. Okay. Anything else?
That's all for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Nita?
So, Mr. Burnell, I wonder if it's appropriate to ask for a staff member memo for him related to his Tesla battery issues. Just, it sounds like he doesn't have a clear update on where things stand. So I'd like to request a memo for him.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right.
So is it a memo we want, or do we want to instruct Don to go out and, it seems like there's a disconnect.
It's true.
So,
Well, you need to know what disconnect is and see which policy you agree with, right? If Don has a concern that they're not meeting what we want, right? He wants to go out and just do what's requested, or do you want to know?
oh
what
no,
the
I think, disconnect
is?
I guess I would like to know that if Don has had a chance to visit. I mean, there are a lot of pretty serious things that were said. I think the first step, well, I guess before I would want to see a memo is just to give Don a chance to visit further to make sure we're.
Be glad to do that, but I'm sure he's talked to
Sure
him.
he
like-
has,
I'm
yeah.
sure he has.
Mhm.
There's maybe a difference of opinion that you need to know about.
Right.
I mean, we're glad to talk to him. We'll make sure he does that, but I think you're going to need a memo to clarify what the different disagreements.
Sure.
Then decide how you want to handle it.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything else?
Ames Public Library had their reboot of the Black Arts Festival this last weekend. It was very well attended and had artists from across the state. So that was very nice. It's been a while since they've done that. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Amber, anything?
Nothing for me.
So a couple things. Saturday is a big day. We have the spring no charge yard waste day. So 8 to 4 p.m. More information is on the city website. Both yard waste and brush. Anything else, Susan, I should mention
It's
on that?
Repair Cafe that day too.
Pardon me?
I forgot it's Repair Cafe day on Saturday too.
Okay.
Where's that at?
That's at the public library.
What time?
10 to 4. And people can bring down, sorry to jump in.
No.
People can bring down things like household furniture, small electronics, bicycles, and things like, there's all sorts of things. So you can check them out online. But they'll be repaired for free by volunteers, and people can be taught a little bit about repairing things in their home.
Thank you.
And then I've been mulling over housing a bit, and there's a property that I've been thinking a lot about for the last couple of years, and it's the State Forest Nursery on South Duff. It's 35 acres. Ground is flat and would be easily developed. It's north of the Southdale subdivision. Utilities are there, lots of great infrastructure. And that land is extremely valuable. And so if the state would sell that, they could buy a property probably several times that size. It's a lot more trees. It would also put this property onto our tax rolls. But my main concern is housing. And it's obviously very close to 30. So Steve has indicated that we've had conversations periodically with the state about this. But just given the situation that we have with housing, I think I would like to ask staff to re-engage with the state to see if they would have a willingness to let this property go and be sold and hopefully single-family housing. This is in the Ames School District. There's so many reasons why I'd love to see houses built on this 35 acres.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything else?
Final thing, this discussion on the Baker subdivision was very interesting tonight. One of the things that I have learned is just there may be some additional due diligence that would be benefit for us to do. And Dylan indicated that a couple of contractors had expressed hesitation about the role of geothermal on the project. And I think it might be valuable for us to get input from an experienced HVAC contractor to make sure that we're approaching this from our own due diligence as a developer to understand the costs of this. And it doesn't mean that we change anything, but I think from a developer perspective, we didn't really know as much as we should know about the cost of this. And if we have to make decisions about which is more important, sustainability versus affordable housing, it seems like that's an important data point to understand. So I would move that we ask staff to reach out to a couple of HVAC contractors in the community just to solicit their input about geothermal in the Baker subdivision.
Is there a second?
I have a question. Can I ask a question? So
Well,
how
do we have
might...
to second
Yeah,
it?
is there a
Oh,
second?
we have a
I'll second
second it
first.
so we
Okay.
can discuss.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So my question would be, we've gone down this road already. Are we thinking that we need additional information as compared to what we've already gotten because of the project that we've already
That's
embarked on?
absolutely correct. So, as I said, I was in favor of this to begin with. It was an experiment by staff to see if we could layer on to this project some of our sustainability goals. But we're in a different place now. The Habitat project has allowed us to understand that there are additional costs for construction that we need to more fully understand. It may be that what we need to do is offer some additional subsidies. So in other words, one of the possibilities is not abandoning the geothermal, but it may be that we need to offer additional subsidies in order to make the project worthwhile. So I'm not approaching this necessarily with a preconceived notion, but this seems to be a very important variable, and no one in the House seems to know much about this. And I just think it would be helpful for us to get some input from local contractors that would help us to close that gap of knowledge.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
That's all. Thanks.
Gloria?
I have a grab bag of things. First of all, I had a very positive experience this afternoon talking to the new dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, who has moved here from Fort Collins. He and his wife have moved to the Oak to Riverside neighborhood, and are really enjoying the walkability of the community and having Wheatsfield so close and having the parks to explore. So I just thought I would share that from the perspective of somebody new to the community, these were positives. And I did point out the farmer's market would be coming in May. Then I know this is not an email that's in our packet, but David Martin sent us a memo about the tree trenches in Campustown. And since I walked past there, I don't think I really need a memo to say, or I don't need his email to say those need cleaning up. But I'm wondering if we could get a memo from staff on what the cleaning and maintenance procedures are for those tree trenches, because many of the trees are broken. There's not a lot growing in the tree trenches, and there's a lot of trash in there. So I would move that we get a memo from staff about what our process is for cleaning and maintaining those tree trenches in Campustown.
Second.
Perhaps a suggestion for changing whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Then we heard a number of things from James Burnell when he was talking to us. And one of those questions was, does the payment receptacle out front of City Hall meet ADA requirements? And I don't know whether staff thought about that when they put it in, that somebody might be rolling up in a wheelchair to use the receptacle, but I would love to just have a memo from staff that confirms whether it meets ADA requirements or not.
Is there a second?
Second.
I thought I heard him talking about the inability or the challenge of depositing the envelope from a vehicle.
He was. That's
Okay.
not what I'm asking for.
Okay, all right.
I'm asking for the memo on ADA.
Very good.
Because I think we've already discussed the issue of that receptacle from the vehicle perspective.
Okay.
Would you be open to a friendly amendment about it for vehicle accessibility too?
Sure, if you want to
Okay.
put that forward.
I've heard that concern from
I have
several
two.
people, so
Is what, too high, too low? What?
yeah, one of the
Both,
two.
Okay, is there a second to the, all right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
And then he also commented on the fact that because he received LEED certification, his insurance rates went down. And I'm wondering if the city knows whether we would have that same positive benefit from LEED certification. So could we get a memo on whether getting actual LEED certification on our buildings and facilities?
We'll reduce our
lead-
property insurance.
Yes.
Be glad to-
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, good. You didn't take the ones that I was going to mention then. We have a official groundbreaking tomorrow for the Fitch Family Aquatic Center, 11 o'clock. So everyone is invited to come out and just recognize the people that made it possible, the donors, but long time coming. And then also, it's a thing called pickleball. We're cutting the ribbon on pickleball courts at Emma McCarthy Lee Park at, get a second here, at 11 o'clock on Saturday. So some fun things going on that improve and enhance the quality of life of the community. So with that, Mark, do we have justification to go into closed session?
Yes, you do. Iowa Code Section 21.51C allows the council to go into closed session to discuss matters presently in litigation.
Okay, is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Emily, thank you for coming. We look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing you in 3 weeks.
Do we want to take just a brief minute to
To say hello.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
coming
yeah,
up
yeah,
here
yeah, yeah,
anyway.
yeah. We're gonna pause closed session. I was like, please come on up and introduce yourself. Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, you can go ahead and
Oh, yeah.
you want to introduce us? Just say hi.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I think you know Quinn pretty well. I'm Martin Hirsch. I'm the new student body president at Iowa State. I'm really excited to work with you guys this next year. I'm excited for our joint city council meeting that we're definitely going to have happen. So yeah, I think Emily's great too, and I'm really excited for her in this role.
All right. Well, congratulations, and we look forward to working together with you also.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks like Emily and I are going to have to stay far apart.
I know.
Oh, how about
How
that?
about that? We're twins. I love it.
Great minds, right?
All right, I'll see you guys.
Yeah, in a few weeks.
Do I
Have a good
stay
end to
for
the.
adjournment or?
No, you
Okay.
know.
All right.
Yeah, but thank
This is normal. This is a pretty short meeting tonight. Normally,
Don't scare her.
I know.
We want you to come back.
I will. That's what I was wondering.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your week.